week's on the radio. Shut up, it's Gaming Focused Audio.
Welcome. It's been a big week in gaming. I'm Intergot for episode 17 on Sunday the 8th of November. In this week's show, we'll be discussing the launch of the next-gen consoles, which are just around the corner, a couple of days for us. A surprise, sort of, announcement around Mass Effect, and we'll do a deep dive into our top 3 most underappreciated games. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, the number one Xbox RPG player in all the Southern Hemisphere. That's about 1 billion people. He's number one. Hall of Famer, Swinny.
Hello.
I just want to put more sauce on that intro.
Yeah. They're actually releasing the results of the Xbox Hall of Fame competition next week, and it's interesting to see all the people on True Achievements being like, I've played every single Game Pass game. I haven't got anything yet, and it's like, it's gonna be cool to see the outcome of it. That, as we know, a lot of those things are already decided, but the random draws, who knows? Maybe I'll score myself an Xbox Series X.
Because are they putting the people who win the Hall of Fame, the random prizes into the Hall of Fame, or it's only the ones who kind of quote unquote earned it?
I don't know. I'd say, hey, if I won the random prize, I'd say I'm in the Hall of Fame. I'd claim that. I'd be like, yes.
Dude, I'm already following a Trump style of just saying you're in the Hall of Fame. I'm just gonna keep saying it. It's gonna get captured in Wikipedia one day, and then everyone's just gonna think you're in the Xbox Hall of Fame.
Now, if they only count the legal achievements and they exclude the illegal achievements, I am already in the Hall of Fame.
Correct. Stop the count. Stop the count from years ago. I think the one that play every the one that they go play every Xbox Game Pass game. So that would have included everything that's ever been on there. So yeah. You literally can't do anything about it now. Well, almost all of these awards you can't do anything about, pretty much, apart from a couple, right? Like that were like you play during the promotion period to get into the Hall of Fame.
There were some categories around like State of Decay and Forza Horizon that I think probably would have been a lot more contested. And I think Sea of Thieves had one as well. But
yeah, that's right. That's the one I was thinking of. Yeah,
there's definitely times when, like, second and third place in, let's say, that region, the amount of gamer score or whatever, like where they're a lot more contested. And you had a whole bunch of people, like, I've mentioned it before, these people know what they're doing on these sites. Because these sites run competitions all the time. Xbox 360 Achievements does it all the time, where it's like people plan out games where they get easy to the point where they're about to unlock like a huge number achievement, and then they'll just park it for when they need it. Like they people are used to this. So but yeah, I guess we're going to be talking a lot about next gen today, and I actually woke up and I've been playing through Tales of Vesperia, and I left something on overnight. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna open up my phone. I'm lying in bed, or the Xbox app. I'm gonna go and check to see if the achievement unlocked while I'm just lying in bed. And I go load it up.
Wait, can I just pause you? So is the Xbox right next to you in this scenario that you're talking about?
No. I'm like in my bedroom, and I was playing on PC, so it's on my PC in the lounge room, and so I'm like, okay, I just want to check, to see if it's unlocked or whatever. And I go load up the Xbox app, and I'm like, oh, it's automatically updated to the new Xbox app, the one that's meant for the Series X, where it like sets it up for you and everything. I'm like, this is all different. There's like 1/4 of the features on this app than there used to be. I'm like, that's interesting.
Oh, really?
Oh, there's no way at all to check any achievement progress on this entire app. And I'm like, there's no way to view a store on this app. I'm like, I know that often when you iterate upon or you launch a new version of an app that, you sometimes scale down to then rescale back up.
Simplify.
Yeah. But and people are pissed about this app. Like, just going on seeing people like, you've removed the ability to do anything that people really cared about, like purchase games on there, and then download them, in advance.
Oh,
Change
they've
your
removed that.
on the app. Yeah,
Jeez, because I knew about that feature. I thought that was pretty cool.
change your profile information on the app. Like, you can't do any of that stuff anymore. So I'm like, man, that sucks. And what it made me wonder, and this is obviously a very specific thing for me and, crazy people like me, where it seems like Microsoft have really, really de-emphasized achievements this gen. Like,
this is
100%.
controversial.
No, because think about it. Think about everything they've talked about Series X and Series S and all their walkthroughs and everything. They haven't really focused at anything at all on achievements.
That's
and it makes
actually
me
true.
wonder, is it like, are we going to see them essentially, begin to really phase that out at some point? Because, I mean, Sony's announced more about the trophies than Microsoft has about achievements for next gen, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like, because of the show, and normally I'd watch most of the stuff, but, we've been watching everything religiously that's coming out of Sony and Microsoft. And you're right, actually. My recollection, I can't even remember them even saying the word achievement. Now, like, surely if I went through, maybe they would have, but it's certainly not been an emphasis. Whereas Sony, many times, I've heard them talk about platinums, trophies. They've changed the system, the way you level up. Like, they've put a lot of love in that. And look, like, I think on your point about them sort of, what did you say about them doing to achievements? Like, they want to sort of...
De-emphasizing it.
Oh,
so
sure. Yeah, maybe
there,
de-emphasize, but not get rid of it or not, like, walk away from it or anything like that. But yeah, probably de-emphasize is the right way to say it. Because it was very core to, like, Xbox 360.
Yeah, but it could be a sign of where things are going in the future, though, to me. Because... honestly, achievements, obviously I love them. I think they're a great concept, but they're probably more than a headache than a benefit to Microsoft at this point, or Xbox, because it does like cause a lot of issues for them on the tech side of, Xbox One had a lot of problems, way more than the 360 with achievements, because they changed everything to be, you had to be connected online to be able to actually like register any of them. So it caused a lot of problems, and so many more games are broken. So yeah, it's interesting. The thing is, right, if that's the case, then it would suck. But at the same time, like, I'd still play games. I'd just probably play. I'd honestly like my game. I do play games more because of that, but I'd still be playing games all the time. So, but yeah, it's just something. From a usability standpoint, the app's pretty piss poor at the moment. But hey, hopefully they'll kind of start adding that stuff back in. So
yeah, because I heard that the PlayStation app's pretty decent. Like, I pretty much hear universal acclaim about what they've done and what they've changed in that space. So it's an interesting juxtaposition there, where one's kind of gone one way and then the other one's gone the complete other way. Never a big fan of when they remove core functionality from an app. Like, personally, like, the whole app space is starting to annoy me in general. Like, there's some really great apps, and I think it's really good when things are on the go. But yeah, I think too often I find myself, I can't do something in the app that I want to do, and then I just go back to my computer anyway to get things done. And I'm sort of like, oh, why did I even bother in the first place with this? So
yeah, I have heard, and I can't say I've tested this myself, that apparently the remote play feature via the new app is also a lot worse than what it was in the previous version.
Oh, that's really bad. That's way worse.
Well, that's the thing is, but the reason I didn't put that up front and center is because I haven't tried it myself. So that's only going off the comments the reviews I saw on the App Store, on the Google App Store specifically. So, but yeah, that's not good if that's the case, because that's actually one of the things they're pushing via that new app. So anyway, so Intergot, you've been playing anything?
So last week, I was saying how many games I played, and I still really want to play Resident Evil 7, but I actually think I'm just too afraid to play that game. Because there was one time I could have played it, and then I'm like, oh, I don't know, it's really like heavy, that game. And then I played a bit of Rocket League, but it's been a struggle this week. There's been a lot going on at work. Like, I've been working like crazy hours, and then my son was like a bit sick, like nothing like life threatening or anything, but he was just a bit sick. So, you know, it was one night I pretty much stayed up all night looking after him and then work the next day. I think I literally had 3 hours sleep in 48 hours. So yeah, I couldn't squeeze too much gaming time. All I end up playing when I go back to my comfort gaming foods are Rocket League and Smash Brothers, if you guys are playing, and then also Mario's Picross on Nintendo Switch Online, because I want to finish that game. I've already gotten through like 3/4 of it on BSNES on the emulator, and now that it's on the Switch, I'm like, oh, I'll get through all those puzzles again. So that's all I've been playing. How about you?
Look, honestly, just Solitarica, which I mentioned last week. I finally completed a run, which I was so happy about. That game can get pretty tough in the final, I guess, battles and that. So beat a run of that. I'm still playing that. And Vesperia. I've put so much time into Vesperia, and I should be wrapping it up today, actually, which is cool. Finished my speed run last night. You have to beat it under 15 hours, and I beat it in like 4 hours and 1 minute. So I was really happy about that.
You beat the whole game in 4 hours.
Yeah, but the way it works is that when you can do your first run through, you can get what's called grade through various means, and then when you continue on to New Game Plus, and there's a grade store, and it says what do you want to, and you can do all these cool stuff like 10 times experience, or like you can give yourselves all these cool features and everything. So the best way to do it is you do your everything in the first run, and then the second run you do the speed run with the grade store like features and stuff like that. So you carry all your items over and everything. So it's just really easy to just run through the game. So when I say 4 hours, like that's the process everyone does, but I still think that's the fastest I've ever done it. So yeah, it was cool. I was expecting for some reason it to take like 6 hours. So yeah, really happy with that. But honestly, that's kind of all I've been playing because Vesperia is just such a beast. And I'm really looking forward to wrapping it up because I'm going to start getting into Code Vein next week, which is cool. Our going to be playing that co-op with a friend of the podcast, Mike, who's who's been a host a couple of episodes back. So yeah, we're looking forward to getting into that. I've only played the first couple of hours of Code Vein. It's from Bandai Namco. It's Souls-like, but it's very different in the same sense. But it's cool. So yeah, looking forward to it. And the other thing I'm really looking forward to is Assassin's Creed Valhalla, of course.
Yeah, that's the 10th, right?
So
2 days.
yeah, so last week I mentioned that as soon as the podcast is finished, I'm first going to buy Ni no Kuni on the because it was on special on the Switch, and I did.
You just got it within like an hour or so.
So happy when you brought it up on the podcast.
Because I had an issue technically of getting the podcast up, not on the regular podcast feed, so people skipped ahead. But I think given the timing of when we post and when that deal expired, I think technically no one could have really heard that was on special.
Except me.
Except
so
you.
it's still worth it. And then I had to just wrap something up with we do a little bit of post production on some stuff on podcasts. But other than that, then I ran to JB Hi-Fi. I'm like, yes, I can go into the store because the shops are open now in Melbourne. I go in there and I'm like waiting at the game desk. There's no one there. I'm like, okay, I've got to go to the front counter. I go there. Can I please pre-order Assassin's Creed Valhalla Steelbook Edition? And they're like sitting there for ages and like, we can't do it. And I'm like, wait, what? And they're like, there's an error in the system that won't allow us to do it. And they're like, it says we're getting 3 copies to this store and only one of them is pre-ordered, but for some reason it won't allow us to do it. And I'm like, okay, the reason I didn't want to order it online, because you just do that, was because I was thinking, okay, it's going to get mailed out days later, and I kind of want to have it on launch day. And
I think with things you really care about, and if you have enough time, so some things you pre-order and it runs out straight away, you have to do it online. But something like that, I think it's smarter to go in the store, eyeball them, chat to them, make sure that you can see it in the system. Like I think that's a good idea.
So their solution was this was what, Sunday. The solution was the games coordinator. I'm like, okay, that's the title name. I didn't know that. He's back in on Tuesday, give us a call on Tuesday. I'm like, huh, okay. I'm like, well, Tuesday's a public holiday here in Melbourne. Will he be here? They're like, oh, yes, he'll be here.
No,
So
they're closed, aren't
then, I don't know.
Oh,
They
okay.
said to call. So,
Yeah.
and then it hit Tuesday. I'm like, you know what, bugger this. And I just bought it online. I said, screw that. And I paid like $5 for express next day delivery. So I'm probably going to get it the day after launch.
Look at you baller. You baller.
So I was like, bugger. Just not going to go through this hassle. Because what? I'll rock up to the store again and they'll have the same issue. Whereas I know that I can just purchase it online. So, yeah.
And I know I can't talk, but I, especially with the insane amiibo collection, I guess you can call it. But man, I checked out that steelbook. It's so expensive compared to like how much the game you can get normally. Like, those things drive me nuts sometimes.
The thing is though that it also comes with the season pass for the DLC, and that's actually a significant cost. So,
and is it one of those seasons pass where it's everything, or it's like season 1 pass?
For Assassin's Creed, that's generally always the case. Yeah.
Okay, that's all right.
Now,
that's all right.
What it sometimes won't do, sometimes there's like a super duper edition that's got like physical statues and stuff, and it might give you a couple of extra weapons in those. I don't care about weapons in those games because the stuff that they give you generally is like outclassed within the first few hours of the game anyway. But I just wanted the DLC and the steelbook, so I got those, and obviously the game. So I'm super pumped. I'm not going to probably give my impression. You know what? I'll probably just kind of just talk about it next week. But that game's going to be a beast, so I'll probably wait until the week after to give a proper review or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah,
no, that makes sense. It's going to be interesting because I know that you're a huge fan of Assassin's Creed, but I do think that the series in general has made a massive resurrection. Just like from my perspective as not a fan, or not like, I don't really have a view on it, to be perfectly frank. But, from an outsider's perspective almost on it, I think people were starting to get a bit sick of the franchise. And then, the last couple of installments, I think people sort of have bought in. And you hear now even random people defending the franchise. So it's going to be, I think this one's really critical. And there's quite a bit of hype about this game. Like if you're actually looking at the sales charts and things like that, this is like one of the top next-gen games. And it's going to be interesting to see how it runs on the next-gen consoles, which, are you happy with that segue?
Let's get into it.
So, we thought, given that we're on the cusp, so when we're recording, it's the 8th, the Xbox Series X is coming out in 2 days, and the Series S as well. And then the PlayStation 5 is coming out in 4 days after we record this. So, next gen's right around the corner. It felt, I don't know to you, just in general, it felt like such a long and short simultaneously lead up to these consoles, because it's almost like normally you see them a lot earlier, you can pre-order them a lot earlier. So that kind of hype that was building up about it just felt like it was going on forever. And then when you actually look at the whole window, it's actually been fairly short. Of, hey, these are the consoles and this is when it's going to be released and this is how much they cost. Do you have that feeling about this launch, or?
Yeah, the same. And in terms of it feeling long and then short, it almost mirrors like everything else that's going on in the world at the moment, and that whole perception of time is that everything from April to like September-ish just felt so long. And it feels like since then, everything's just like, I can't believe we're, already in the 8th of November. It feels like, this month is already going so quick. And that's what I felt about these consoles, is that ever since, I guess I'd say since July, August, it feels like things have just now come up so quickly. Whereas before, it just felt so long. And I think that's just because everything felt so long. But you're right. Normally there's some much longer lead up. Normally we get the proper, unveiling the E3 prior, and then the next E3 will be kind of where they really dig into it, and then they launch in that holiday period. So it's kind of, it's actually been a way shorter cycle than normal, I reckon.
Yeah, and I think the way memory works, it's sort of like dependent on how much stuff has happened, and then that gives you a sense of how much time has passed. Because I was, my phone randomly shows me images and photos that have happened. And I don't know what the algorithm it is, but it just shoots things out. And one of them was, it showed me, me going to a Tool concert this year. And I was like, wait, I went to that concert this year? It literally feels like years ago. And then it's also weird in the whole context with coronavirus. I was like literally in a concert stacked with people sweating all over each other. And that was February of this year. And it just feels like, oh my God, like, I can't even imagine myself going to a concert for a long time, to be perfectly honest. Like, I'm pretty conservative with that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been a funny year. And these consoles, I don't know, it just really came up very quick. Like all of a sudden I was listening to podcasts and people are like, oh, the consoles are coming out next week. I'm like, oh yeah, they are. Like they really are. And yeah, like the lineup, it's interesting, dude. Like I want to be hyped, and I am actually hyped about them because I think the SSDs are really, really cool. But I just feel like there's never been a launch that's so iterative and evolutionary, not revolutionary.
So I definitely feel that about the Xbox side. I think everyone would probably agree that, it feels like almost like just the next, iteration of the Xbox One kind of, line from the Xbox
like it's
One
almost
to
a Xbox One X2.
Yeah. And the launch lineup is probably the biggest thing with that. And honestly, if, and that's because the absence of Halo, we know the reason for that. Whereas the PlayStation side does feel a lot more like a traditional next-gen launch, but it's kind of, when you combine it with the Xbox side, definitely. But both platforms, more than ever are now just like, well, backwards compat, like we kind of forget that backwards compatibility wasn't even there for the Xbox One at launch. That came after.
For a second, I thought you were talking about the Xbox OG. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. So it's really this generation where it's become almost the standard. Now I know that consoles have had backwards compatibility before. The PS2 had it, for PlayStation and stuff, and some of the versions of PS3, and then they start, having different versions that didn't have it. The Wii, some versions of the Wii, the good versions, could play GameCube games, and it's not a new thing, but it's almost like it's been a much bigger focus this next gen launch, and especially on the Xbox side, because they've had to focus on that. They've got a couple of good games at launch, but they haven't got that killer app, and so they've had to kind of focus on, especially first party app. They've had to focus on everything else,
So I mean, yeah, there's like two big things that I want to chat about there. So like the lineup versus the backwards compatibility stuff. In terms of the lineup, for me personally, like I really feel, and I think you and I, even though I joke that you're an Xbox fanboy, I don't think either of us is too biased to the consoles. Like in terms of we have an allegiance, and we won't judge things as independently as we can. I love a lot of Nintendo stuff, but there's reasons why I love that. And I definitely think I have a bit of nostalgia goggles with some of their games. But with the Xbox Series X, just again, to me, it's sort of like, I just feel like you're not going to miss out on anything if you're playing in your current setup, like Xbox One X. Like if you have that, it's like, to me, there's no compelling reason to switch. Whereas with the PlayStation 5, at least for me, and we're not talking about this in its own segment, but the whole, I don't know if you watched the Demon's Souls State of Play that just got released last night. So that went for like about 12 minutes. Like that game to me looks like that next gen game. And it's like exclusive. You can only play it on the PS5. Then there's Astrobot, which also to me seems like such a cool experience. Ratchet and Clank's right around the corner, and just kind of like, as someone who's not really like pro PlayStation or Xbox too much, I've had both consoles. I just feel like, the lineup with PlayStation 5 is more compelling. Like it's more of a reason to get one. Like you feel like you're missing out. It's that FOMO. It's like, oh geez, that Demon Souls games look incredible, and it's the only place to play it. Whereas, pretty much everything on the Xbox, apart from, something we will talk about, the medium, is sort of like on both or on prior consoles.
Yeah, definitely. And you look at the PlayStation lineup, Astro looks amazing. The only thing about Astro is I don't know how much of a fully featured game it is. I know it's a pack-in.
It's about 3 hours if you just get through it.
Okay, so I think
that's not a
it's
full featured game.
Yeah, so but it looks amazing, and it's a showcase, just like Nintendo would do. It's a showcase for the new haptic stuff and everything like that. And for me, yeah, Demon Souls is the launch game. That is the
Holy
one.
moly.
If you really don't care about Demon Souls, then maybe Spider-Man Miles Morales will kind of be your launch game. They're kind of the two big ones, especially on the PlayStation side because they're obviously exclusive. Now something like Godfall, I know we've crapped on Godfall, but that game, like, something I haven't said before is that that game has potential. It's just I think the marketing has really failed it. Every time they've shown it off in a way that just looks very unappealing. So there's some people that obviously might be excited for that. It is exclusive.
Well, it's only a temporary exclusive.
Temporary exclusive.
It's like 6 months, I think.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think that's likely, and they said, okay, it's exclusive this period of time, but I mean, there's nothing officially announced that it would be coming to Xbox.
Oh, I thought it came out just the other day that it's going to come out to Xbox Series X.
That's people musing on the fact that it's a timed exclusive, so it's likely. Okay. It is very likely that's the case.
Yeah, it's almost certain that it will, but yeah.
And then we've got, a whole bunch of games that are being, either getting huge expansions at the time, of the launch, like Destiny 2, or, No Man's Sky, where, they're getting significant enhancements for next gen. So on the PlayStation side, and you've got, big third parties that are launching both on next gen and current gen. So, talking about Valhalla, Black Ops Cold War, which is obviously a huge deal.
And Call of Duty, that's going to be like the number one game on next gen. I mean, you can look at that in the sales charts; it's already number one. And Assassin's Creed is going to be massive as well. You're right.
And Watch Dogs Legion has already come out now, but now obviously it's coming on next gen. Actually, did you hear something funny about the procedurally generated NPCs in Watch Dogs Legion?
No, what happened?
So it's how they procedurally generate all the NPCs, and they'll give them occupations, but then also like tidbits about them.
Mm-hmm.
So one was, this is no joke, pediatrician, and the tidbit has ended a relationship with a former client.
Client. Oh dear. Oh dear.
I also don't want to forget, like, the Pathless does look very good on the PS5, and as much as people laugh about it, and while it's cross-gen, you got cool games like Bug Snacks, which is on PS Plus, so that'll be a game that a lot of people will probably play because it'll be free on there.
And it's such a smart idea, because it also helps people. Like, people always forget there's going to be people who have been off PlayStation and go, hey, you know what, I miss PS4. PS5 plays all of PS4 practically. Why don't I jump on this new generation? There's a bunch of people that go through that cycle. Yeah. So this just helps push them even further. And along with, hey, here's 19 games that come with PS Plus collection, which are insanely good games. And also, just on that quickly, we've got confirmation that the way it works is pretty much how PS Plus works now, which is you have the games on your profile if you've downloaded them, or like, it's basically like buy them, quote unquote, but they're free. And then they links it to your account, and as long as your account's active, you have the games. So if you deactivate it and activate it later, you'll have the games on your profile, which is actually really interesting to know. And I wonder when they're going to expire, because I don't feel like licensing, they won't have that forever. So
you should just go and get them all. And even if you don't plan on playing them for ages, if that's the way it works.
We still don't know how it works, so we'll have to wait till Thursday, because they keep on emphasizing that you have to do it on the PlayStation. So currently with PS4, you can do it in the app or the web app. So if you can do it there, it's almost worthwhile getting a month trial just to add them all to your profile.
Yeah, and another game that is on both that, honestly, the more I see about it, the more I hear about it, the more that it actually looks really cool, is actually Dirt 5. of all
I
games.
was going to joke and say Need for Speed.
Yeah, so Dirt 5 actually looks, when you
It
watch
looks
the next
insane.
gen,
It looks
yeah, when you
insane.
next watch the next gen footage of that, it's really cool, and we'll talk a bit about Codemasters later as well. But I guess, look, on the PlayStation side, look, you can't go past Demon's Souls and Spider-Man. They are huge hitters for a launch. And then, as you said, with Ratchet around the corner, which looks like a truly next gen game,
Yeah.
yeah, PlayStation definitely is, from the game standpoint, for next gen things you can only play. As you mentioned, FOMO. It's PS5. For the Xbox One side, so they may have the numbers in terms of obviously the overall. They've got everything on Game Pass and stuff like that, but they just don't have those huge hitters, and their huge hitters are third parties that are on PS5 as well. So, if you care about Black Ops and Valhalla, well, you can play it on either. So there's no reason for either of them. There is actually one game that actually does look pretty cool, and it's almost like you got the Pathless on the PS5 side, and you got the Falconeer on the Xbox One side. The Falconeer actually looks really, really cool. Very different style of game. The Falconeer is kind of almost like a Panzer Dragoon style game, or like a Star Fox. As opposed to Pathless, which is like an adventure game. But the Xbox. I mean, probably the biggest thing I'd say call out that's exclusive is Yakuza, which will eventually come to PS5 and is on PS4, going to be available earlier as well. But if you want to play next gen Yakuza, you've got to play it on Xbox One until March. And honestly, Gears Tactics, because
which is a game that people are sleeping on.
Yeah, and because that game got really good reviews when it came out on PC in April, but I mean, hasn't come out on console until now, so it's I think that's actually good, but it's not going to move the needle. Like, we know that also Gears 5 is getting significant enhancements, but it's hard for me to consider that a launch game.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's the work they've done on that is way more than just than, let's say, we just make it run in a high resolution. They've actually done a lot of work there, but that work was probably also in place from the PC version that was there. So yeah, but overall, I mean, there's quite a few. There are smaller titles in Xbox One launch that may not be on PS5 right away. It's hard to kind of also look this stuff up because it's so messy with. Okay, is it in the list of launch games because it's available just by smart delivery? Well, is that technically next gen or not? It's like, okay, it recognizes which console you have and then downloads the assets for that console. So it's hard to kind of say, okay, is that technically next gen? It's weird. This whole lineup thing, especially on the Xbox side, is just, it's really weird this time. But it's kind of cool. Like, the smart delivery thing is great, that you only have to buy it once, So it's, while we're kind of saying it's like we're kind of crappy on that a little bit, it's technically, and from a consumer standpoint, it's actually really good. But definitely, when you talk about the lineup, PS5, that's the one that's got it.
Yeah, and then on that backwards compatibility point that we mentioned earlier, and probably I got a little bit attacked by people around backwards compatibility because I was always a bit wary of it, and I've always felt, whenever Sony has to rely on anything software to do emulation or backwards compatibility, they always have issues. Versus Microsoft, they're almost at a point where, they're so good at that stuff that it's pretty indistinguishable, like in terms of the backwards compatibility, if they're using anything of the software. And, we've even seen, and, there was a story last week around Assassin's Creed Syndicate, that was one of the games that wouldn't, like, they kind of almost said it wouldn't work on the PS5, and then quickly Ubisoft retracted that statement. But you're hearing now from hands-on with people, and what happens is a lot of the games on the PS5 that have the PS4 backwards compatibility, I don't know if you know this, but when they load, it actually gives you a warning message saying that there may be issues with this game and graphical artifacts and things like that. And then just hearing people play really big games like, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, they're like, oh, the textures are weird and there's weird stuff in the game itself. And I just don't think it's a one-for-one. I don't think like Xbox version of backwards compatibility is equal to PlayStation's version of backwards compatibility, even though people are talking about it interchangeably.
What would really suck, and I hope this isn't the case, is that you're playing like Syndicate, which is a great game by the way, but it's also significantly it's a massive game, and if you get all the way through, or you're getting a good way through the game, and then suddenly you hit a game-breaking glitch because of backwards compatibility, that would really suck. I really hope that's not the case, because at that point, you may not be able to progress. I'm not sure if you can then sync your save back to your old console to keep playing it. Probably not. I find that would probably be difficult to do.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're kind of screwed unless they patch the game. And I'd say bigger publishers would probably patch the games if it's something simple. But there's a lot of games that wouldn't be patched.
Yeah, and I think that's for games that are like selling, right? So maybe it's a year or two old, it's still selling. You want to patch that and make sure it works. But for a game that is only seeing modicum of sales, it's just not going to stack up economically to go back and fix things. And to me, it's concerning when you have developers who are trying to actively make it work. You know how there's that now infamous, I guess, list of games that don't work on the PS5 from the PS4, and some of the developers are still going, we don't know why this is not working. And I'm like, that's just like odd to me. Like it does really make me wonder, once this goes out into the mainstream, the amount of YouTube videos we watch on, stuff that just doesn't work and just like a bit of a mess because of backwards compatibility. And then the next one is like, I wonder, and you will never know this, but I wonder how much work CD Projekt Red had to do to make sure they're removing any of those graphical artifacts. Because from my perspective, Cyberpunk is just going to be regarded as a launch window title for the next-gen consoles. More so if it came out when it was meant to, but I acknowledge now that it's December 10, it's like kind of out of that window, even the more liberal window that you could give it. But I think most people, when they think about that game, in 10 years' time, we'll think it's a PS5/Xbox Series X game more than it's a last-gen game.
Well, you even had Control, like Remedy. I'm not sure if it's Remedy or 505 that announced it, but basically saying that the next-gen version of Control is not actually going to be ready till next year now. So
yeah, well, there's been a few delays in that way, and we'll get onto another one soon. But
the one thing I forgot to mention, call out in the Xbox lineup, although this one's a bit of a kind of this context to this one, is Tetris Effect Connected. That's actually a really great launch title. The thing is with that is that eventually the I guess the connected version or a whole bunch of that stuff will be available as like, I'm not sure if it's paid or a free update for the standard version Tetris Effect on PlayStation 4 at least, which I guess would be backwards compatible on PlayStation 5. God, it's so confusing. But so Tetris Effect Connected is really, really cool, I think, to have on launch. Again, it's not, especially considering it's like it's an upgraded port, basically. It's not what you consider like a killer app. But I just wanted to call that out. I forgot about that one. So
yeah. And then, just going back to the, like the games and the new features, for me, 30,000 foot version, like, hey, what's new in next gen? To me, like so far, both consoles, the discussions around ray tracing, that's one thing. The other one is now it's this not juxtaposition, but the choice that gamers need to make between, do they want to play in performance mode or quote unquote cinematic mode in games? It seems like so many games are going to force you, or at least have that option, which I know is in some games, but it seems like that's now becoming like a standard thing in games, which a bit odd to me. And then obviously then the headline feature of the next gen is the SSD. Outside of that,
yes.
I don't really see anything else like that people are really saying, okay, this is thrusting forward. This is, I could go back to the other generations. I mean, for God's sakes, like we're talking about, hey, you can play online with your friend. Like that's a feature. Like that's huge.
Yeah.
SSD is the closest thing to being the big feature, I think, in this console.
Yeah, and on the SSD, so it came out this week, the Series S, which is it 500 or 512 gig? What's the size for the Series S again?
It's 512.
512.
Like, and, that's by the way, whenever we say that, that's the, kind of manufacturer 512. That doesn't mean that's usable space, which is what you'll get into, yeah.
Yeah, so the usable space, it came out that it will have 364 gig of usable space.
That's nothing.
And I like, on some forum threads, where I roam, I'm like, anybody that defends this is in denial. And oh my god, some people were pissed about that. Or,
Oh, really?
well, okay, not pissed, but they were
Why?
like, oh no, this is fine. It's a win-win for me. And I'm like,
How's it a
I didn't
win-win?
bother responding to these people because I'm like, at this point, you are those fanboys. You're like, how is 364? Like, they've already announced that on PS5, so I'm not sure about Xbox Series S or X, that on PS5, Black Ops Cold War is like 150 gig download without Warzone, because I'm guessing they're adding Warzone. I'm not sure about that. I don't know enough about the next Call of Duty, but like, okay, so if you want to play the next Call of Duty on your Series S, which a lot of people will want to, that's possibly going to take up close to more than a third of your hard drive in one game. Now
Yeah.
that's it. That is on the upper end of things. I understand that. There's a lot of games, especially, a lot of smaller Game Pass games where you're not going to get, anything close over 100. But 364 gig, that's like 360 era sizes. It's kind of, especially for a console, and I know it doesn't make as much difference these days because you have to still install them, but, that's a digital-only console. So it's kind of like, at that point, now, we know you can have your cold storage games on a regular old USB hard drive that's not like an NVMe kind of fancy SSD one. So you can do your cold storage on that stuff, but anything you actually want to play, you has to be stored on that SSD, or you have to fork out. Do we know what was the Australian cost of the expansion pack? It was like 300 and something bucks, wasn't it?
380, I think. And I was just on the eBay site before, and it's sold out. So I don't think you can get it at launch.
Like, but even if you were to buy an Xbox Series S and go, oh wait, this is getting tricky. I'm going to go get me an expansion pack, and you can get one. Then suddenly you've already spent the cost of a Series X.
Correct. And plus, I know I keep saying it, but that $50 difference that they baked into the price. I mean, it does add up though, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
I
it gets you closer to the Series X. And you're right. Like, the extra space that you get, it's extra half gig space on the hard drive with the Series X compared to the Series S. Like, that's massive. And, I know that before you were saying, hey, it's just it's Call of Duty, but Call of Duty will be the number one game that comes out on the next gen.
Yes.
So the number one game is going to take up a third of your space. And what it reminds me of is actually very last gen. You remember back in the day with stuff like the PlayStation, the memory cards?
That's exactly what I was thinking of. It's like games that would just take the whole memory card.
Yeah, the memory card, you have like slots on physically. This is really dating us now. You could write down what game is on there because you could only fit 1 to 3 maybe, game saves. And game saves, by the way. So that's what it really reminds me of. And I have to say, I really... I'm sure you're the same. A lot of people ask me about technical stuff or tech stuff and gaming. Like, hey, my kid wants to buy this, or I want to get that. Should I get this or should I get that? I have to say, I was almost like on the side that, hey, I think the Series S is not too bad to recommend to people. I'm completely off it now because this hard drive is just farcical. It just won't fit things.
If I know someone is only gonna play maybe a couple of games and that's all they'll ever really play, like someone will pick up your FIFA or they'll play Battlefield or something, if I know that they're not going to need it, then I'd still be like, okay, look, yeah, this is the case, but if you run into any issues, you may need to upgrade in the future. But it's the thing for me as well is that I guess one of the okay things about this is if you are an existing Xbox One owner and you already use an external drive like I do and most people, is that all that stuff you can just plug straight in. So you can, anything that's like from last gen backwards compatible, you don't have to use that space up with that. You can just plug that hard drive straight in and just continue to use that because any backwards compact games don't need to be loaded off the SSD. But though, especially for anyone that's going to pick up a Series S that hasn't had an Xbox in a while, maybe not since the 360, it's going to hit them because they're going to be, oh yeah, 364 gig, that sounds huge. Why do I need more than that? And then they don't realize that Call of Duty is 150 gig or so. Now, the Series S is probably, the assets are probably going to be lower than that, but still,
Yeah, but they're
knowing
not,
that
though.
each update will add another 20 gig onto that, and it's like, so Call of Duty on PS5 could end up being over 200 by the end of it, like, unless they are smarter about the way they handle their updates.
Yeah, I'm just not. They're not, though. Like, and I actually will rate what Microsoft says. I think they've changed a lot. I think you can actually, defer to what they're saying as being honest. But I think I'm not saying they're being dishonest, but their whole ploy around, hey, because it's the Series S and it doesn't really natively output to 4K, but it can, by the way, like, which is kind of odd. I think it can, I'm not 100% sure. I should have checked this. I think it might even be able to output to 8K, but it just generally doesn't because it's not powerful enough. But regardless, they're relying on publishers and developers to optimize for the Series S, the assets. I tell you what, to be perfectly frank, dude, if I, and I'm more of a business person, but if I was running a studio, I would say don't bother about that. Just release the game. Like, don't spend any time on that. Because what gain will I have by doing that? Nothing. Like, I'm not gonna have one less sale because someone goes, oh, it's a little bit too big. It's 80 gigabytes instead of 70.
But the thing is, they may be forced to throw on release on Xbox because a lot of those higher res things may not even be supported by the S.
No. But they've already said it's up to the publishers and developers, right? So you have to have the assets there that downscale. But a lot of the developers already do that because they've got PC and lots of stuff happening.
So you're saying to not include it in the download, the smart delivery kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just say don't bother about it. Just release the exact same version on the Series X as the Series S. Because you want to code it in such a way it can run on either. But I'm not going to manipulate the install size so the Series S, is slightly smaller than the Series X. That's just what businesses look at this stuff and just go, will I lose one sale by not doing it? No. Am I going to spend money to do it? Yes. Why would I do it? It's actually economically illogical to do it. And I think most of them won't do it. I mean, it seems like already the biggest ones aren't doing it, and they have the most resources to be able to do that kind of stuff.
But we don't know about it, the Series S install size of Call of Duty, I don't think yet, do we?
No,
I don't know if we know how to approach that.
Microsoft's already said that they think about 35% of them will do it. I remember Phil Spencer talking about it.
But regardless, I mean, it's a pitiful amount of space. Like, there's defending it. And you can... The arguments that people say is, well, SSDs, like, the cost, blah, blah, blah. Well, to me, I know SSD is, like, the core feature of this gen, but as soon as you start making it actually potentially hamper someone's experience playing games and trying to access games, then to me it's almost detrimental. But we'll see. We'll see whether or not it becomes an issue with like the Series X and the PS5, which have like 800 or gig so usable space in their drives, or I think slightly less for PlayStation. But it's we'll see whether or not that it becomes an issue in the future for what I'd consider the proper consoles, the ones that people.
What an elitist! What an elitist! Hey, don't you forget, Daddy Spencer said that it's going to be the number one seller, the Series S.
Well, was Xbox 360 Arcade the top seller? Because that's how I compare
but I think it's
Series
totally
S.
different to that. I think it's totally different to that.
It's still like if anything, it's worse because
that's extreme, dude. That's extreme what you're saying.
No, let me explain. The Xbox Arcade was the same technically as the normal 360. It was just the fact that it didn't come with an inbuilt hard drive. It gave you these memory things, right?
Yeah, which was a massive problem.
Yeah, that was a massive problem, but the actual Series S is actually way less powerful than the Series X, so it's worse when you compare the two, the disparity between the versions of each, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not necessarily 100% true what you're saying, because yes, it is less powerful. It's not like the PS5. PS5 digital and then the PS5 disc edition are the same CPU, RAM,
It's
everything.
significantly less powerful.
No.
We've
But what
seen
I'm
the
saying
numbers.
is, let me finish my point. It's that they are outputting to different resolutions. And I get that. That's what I do on my PC. I have a 1440p monitor and a 1080 monitor. And I actually game mostly on the 1080 because I output at 1080 and then I get a higher frame rate. So for me, it feels like the same quality as the 1440, right? So like it's a little bit like that. It's yes, the actual machine is less powerful, but it's pumping out less. So then from a frames, you're around the same. It's just the fidelity of the image is less. But then, by the way, I think most people, or not most, but a vast majority of people don't even have 4K or haven't even set up their 4K TVs correctly in the first place.
100%. Like, I don't have 4K TV.
Yeah, so you're not going to notice the difference. It's actually not going to perform that much better.
Give it a year, and I reckon we'll start to see games that are running I'm trying to think the best way to explain it. I reckon we'll start.
So it's going to become like the base model of the Xbox One and PS.
I reckon we'll start to see similar to how games struggle on Xbox One versus the Xbox One X. I reckon we'll start to see that happen, not to begin with, but I think we'll start to see that become a thing where it's like we'll have. It struggles on the Series S, but it runs smoother on the Series X. You know, I reckon we'll see that because the whole, like, I understand what you're saying 100%, and it's all correct. I just think that at some point something's got to give with the less computing power, and I think we'll see some games struggle with it. So
yeah, and look, for me, like the way I look at it, you know, and by the way, we haven't even really said where we landed with these consoles, because last week, you know, I told you that I got Game Pass. I think that was last week, right?
Yeah.
And you know, by the way, in our notes, I've created a chart which shows how the amortized amount that I've spent on Game Pass versus how much I've saved on not getting it. So, like, I've got like a graph, and I want to see if it actually stays above it from a cumulative perspective.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
But so that triggered me to go, hey, you know what? I might get like Series X, and we will talk about this news later. There is a game that got announced as part of Xbox Game Pass that I'm super excited about, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, these kind of games are coming on Xbox, but then it's coming on PC, and ultimately, I guess where I'm landing with this generation, I just feel like, you know, I've got a very beefy PC. It's probably more powerful than the next gen consoles, number one. And then I've got like it's almost, for me, feels like it's illogical for me to get a Series X. Given that I've got Game Pass, PC, it would make way more sense to get a PlayStation 5 eventually to complement that setup. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And where are you landing? Like, do you have a gut feel as to when you'll get because you are going to get an Xbox Series X eventually?
Oh, 100%.
But is that within a year, you reckon? Is that
well,
if you saw it in the store, now we've already confirmed.
No.
We've already confirmed with the store
because
that
I've got a
One
X that is doing me fine at the moment.
No. But okay, can I paint the scenario? So you're playing Valhalla on the One X. It's struggling a bit. You're hearing all these, you know, reports about how beautifully smooth it runs on the Series X, and then you see one in the store, the Series X. I
went through that exact process with Origins, Assassin's Creed Origins. The exact same thing happened. No. So the exact same thing happened with Origins on Xbox One and the One X.
Yeah,
is that the One X was ran the game apparently way smoother and nicer and everything, which it did, but the playing through a One X was still fantastic. So I think that's probably going to be the exact same with Valhalla, because they're usually really good at optimizing the games, Ubisoft, with that stuff. With the One X, as I mentioned before, if as soon as they turn around and say, okay, this game has been ported, and it's such a weird thing to know, the whole port but backwards compatibility thing now, but if they port and make, okay, here's a remastered version of a game that I really like, you know, not that this would ever happen, but let's say Final Fantasy 13 Trilogy gets a remaster in the next gen or something, right? Not that people are screaming out for that. But that's just an example. I'd probably be like, okay, then that's an example when I would actually pick it up. Just like I picked it up when the Xbox One, when they announced Dark Souls 2 Scholar of First Sin. So there's something that, or of course a brand new game. Like if Elden Ring turns out to be next gen only, which
I think it will.
Yeah, which I agree. But the thing is, I don't think that game's out for a while. But let's say it turns out that's a game coming out in March, right? It's not, but an example. I'd be getting one then. So it's an example of like it's going to take a game or like a really cool remaster of a game with a separate achievement list that's going to get me across. So.
How about Final Fantasy VII Remake if that only came out on Xbox Series?
I probably wouldn't pick it up just for that.
Okay.
Yeah, my feelings on that game are slightly complicated. But that's a separate thing. But I will be picking one up. It's just I'm probably not going to pick one up for I'd say March, April at the earliest. Unless there's a reason that we think, then I'm like, okay, it makes sense for the show. I'll say the one.
Well, I've been waiting for this excuse to come out.
No.
The show.
The thing is, if a game comes out, it's like, okay, we need to with something, like I've never had that justification before. That's the only other reason, but I can't see that happening before like that March, April, which is probably when I'd, consider picking one up. So.
And it's interesting because you're right though, like just talking about the games, so many games that are getting announced even after the next gen's out, they're actually talking about the games coming out for current gen or soon to be last gen. So there's a massive lag for the system, and that includes an announcement that just happened overnight. So Mass Effect, the long rumored game, we've already spoken about it, like that it's definitely coming out, and finally it's been unveiled by BioWare on N7 Day as we predicted. And actually kind of worked out almost exactly how we predicted. We said that they'll make like an announcement the day before to say, or a couple of days before to say, hey, this game's like, there's a special thing that we want to announce. Which is, I don't know if you saw that tweet from EA. Like they did that the other day to say, hey, there's something big coming. So again, and I do like that the fact that in the release they acknowledged that they couldn't keep it a secret. They wanted to, but it's Mass Effect Legendary Edition, which we've already covered, and it does include all the single player base content DLC from the trilogy, including all the promo weapons, packs, armors, and interesting, yes, it's been remastered and optimized for 4K. So it sounds like they've actually put a lot of effort into getting this game up and running. It's going to come out.
That's a reason to get 4K TV for me.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to see these games in 4K.
Well, it looks, like we haven't seen gameplay footage of it. It's just a teaser trailer. And there's also, and we should say it's coming out on the Xbox One, PS4, and PC. And they've quoted it as, I haven't actually heard this term, with forward compatibility for Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5. And essentially it seems like they're going to do some enhancements for it, but it doesn't at this stage seem like they're going to make it a Xbox Series X and PS5 game. Maybe down the track.
But every like that's why it's so muddy. We just spent a whole segment talking about it. Every game that comes out at this point, you assume that you're going to, down the line, going to be able to go on a PS5 or a Series X on the digital store and purchase this game. Even if it was made for last gen. But that's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's like it's so essentially it is coming out on next gen. It's just the lines are blurred now. It's so weird.
Yeah, and you'll get, like, people have already said it, that, and we spoke about it in the last segment, but there are some games, when you play it, it is a little bit odd on next gen because of the speed. We've mentioned this on the podcast before, somewhat erroneously, but, once the clock speeds go up, some games aren't coded to acknowledge that the clock speed could be higher, and it can cause some weird issues underneath the engine. But I think this is super exciting news. Like, as you harshly judged me in my pile of shame of games that I haven't played. I've only fired up Mass Effect 1 and played it for, I don't know, like 3 or 4 hours, I think. And it wasn't that I think it was a bad game. It just kind of fell off the radar for me, and then I never got back to it. But I'm actually super keen on this because I always wanted to play this trilogy. I know that, the third game is a bit sort of controversial. It's going to be super interesting to see if they're doing anything about that, because they have said in this release that they're trying to modernize the game but retain the core of it.
Mass Effect 3 is a good game that unfortunately is scarred by what happens at the end, and unfortunately that leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouth. So that's why a lot of people don't like it. So.
But this is where I'm coming from. Maybe I don't know what it is, and I don't want to know. But you never know. They might do something about that in this trilogy remaster.
I bloody hope so, because I've got an easy out, and with I'm not going to get into spoil territory. So
yeah. We don't want to do that.
There's an easy out for it, but we'll see if they've got the balls to do it.
And I think the thing here is that the reason why I think this is really headline news as well is that they've also then confirmed that BioWare and the way that they've framed this around a veteran team is working on the next chapter of the Mass Effect universe, which I think is very exciting news for all fans of the franchise.
As long as Casey Hudson is involved, that's all I need.
Well, it's almost certain because he's actually penned this letter.
Yeah.
So I take that for, he's definitely involved. So I think it's great news for Mass Effect fans. I know that you played Andromeda and some of our other mates didn't think it was that bad, but, general reception's pretty poor for that game.
Oh, 100%. It's a game just like Assassin's Creed Unity, where the game is forever tainted because of how it launched. And there's more problems with Andromeda than just the launch problems. People have very justified issues with the story being a retread and, the characters not being as good as, the original trilogy. But what people talk about is it being buggy, it being, the horrible facial animations that they all patched that and all improved that stuff, just like they did with Unity. And I'm just other than some, exceptions like, Valhalla, I'll pick up and play right away. But it's, I'll usually wait to play a game, and that comes just really at this day and age, waiting usually gives you a better experience because they patch all that stuff out. So that was my experience with Unity and Andromeda. So I didn't get to see any of that stuff. So I actually really liked both those games. So it's maybe just wait.
Yeah, and I think the over-reliance on day one patches has created this real crazy culture where games are shipping, moderately broken, and, they're getting reviewed and they're essentially broken. So, this is going way back, but Days Gone, that game got panned from a critical perspective, but a lot of people, when they look at, people who reviewed it after it launched versus the critics who reviewed it, and I'm talking about people who are critics but they just didn't play it, there's a marked disparity, and it's essentially they were playing a broken game, reviewing it, then it got patched, and a lot of people are like, look, yeah, maybe it's not a 10 out of 10, but it's probably an 8 or a 7, but when people reviewed it, it probably legitimately was a 6 or a 7. And it has a huge impact on these kind of games. So yeah, I think Andromeda really suffered from, the memes and just the whole perspective on it, right? So
and with Andromeda, when I started playing that game, I was, got to the first, that game is it has open world planets and stuff. So very different than the first Mass Effect trilogy. With the exception, there was some open world planet exploration on number one with the buggy, but that was very different. So it was very much okay. Let's take Dragon Age Inquisition model of make it more open world and almost MMO questy and put that in Mass Effect, and that initially kind of pushed me away. I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this, but eventually it clicked with me. But the combat in that game is just so good, and that's what I loved about it. So there's definitely people that do like Andromeda, but obviously. It was crap at launch. There's no defending that. It was just horrible. It's, as I've mentioned in the past, it's a shame that game set up these really cool open threads that was a cliffhanger to lead into a sequel that's never going to happen, and a DLC that was planned that never happened. So unless they plan to kind of wrap that up in a log in the next new sequel or something to kind of give some people some closure or do something like that. We'll never find out what happened, which is a shame. But oh well.
And I haven't played Andromeda, but it does also seem like, and that would be weird if I played that, but I didn't play the Mass Effect trilogy. But it does seem like one of those games, and this happens in movies as well, where it just doesn't even have any love in terms of like it's odd or something. So it has a bit of a cult following. It's more what I hear. Some people are like, it's not that bad. It's not as bad as what people are saying, but they're not going, it's great. Like, I love it. It's my favorite Mass Effect game. You know what I mean? And I think you're right. Like, it'll never have a sequel. Game.
Generally, and it shouldn't get a sequel because you just look at the sales and, like from a business standpoint, it should not get a sequel at all. Yeah. But just like me, a lot of people, generally what they praise about that is the combat and the gameplay, because that is actually really, really solid and a huge step up. And the other reason I love it was because they brought more of the RPG back in that kind of filtered out in number 2 and 3. So I'm super excited. And they also unveiled a whole bunch of promo items as well.
Yeah, these really cool promo items. Like, I don't have any nostalgia, I guess, for Mass Effect, but they announced on the N7 days, and also by the fact that there's a lot of activity on Twitter around Mass Effect and N7, which is impressive for a franchise that really its last loved entry is a long, long time ago now. But yeah, they've got toys coming out. They've got like little character posters and cards, but one that really caught my eye was the replica of the Alliance Normandy SR1, which is like a scaled down version. This looks really insanely cool, dude.
Just looking it up. Is SR1 the first ship? Just checking. I should know this because each game's had a different Normandy like.
Just checking as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Not going to spend too long on it. But yeah, it's because basically, the ship gets kind of like big redesigns from each game. So yeah. Anyway, regardless, like it's such a cool ship design. It's probably my favorite spaceship. That's not the next generation Enterprise, that classic one. But yeah.
No, it looks sick. I'm actually shocked it's only 500 units. Like, I just think sometimes when you see these things, like, I'm not into Mass Effect. Not that I'm against it. I just never really got into it. But I looked at this item and I'm like, damn, that looks really, really cool. Like, I just feel like this will be swallowed up so quickly.
I wonder if Mike knows yet.
You have to get it.
I wonder if Mike knows yet. We gotta tell him.
Yeah, well, I think he needs to get on top of it because... No, seriously, I think this will sell out straight away. Yeah. Like, they're only making 500 units of it. It's $250 US, which for what this is, given it's made of resin and everything like that, it's actually pretty decent. Man, and this is a kind of cool item to have like on your desk or something like that.
Man, I want them to make a Lego Normandy. Oh, that'd be so cool. That'd be so cool.
Yeah, so it's a lot of cool news about Mass Effect. I think this is a real good opportunity for BioWare. They've gone through a lot of heartache over the last few years with some critical and not flops from a commercial perspective by any means. Like, Anthem was a top 5 game in the year it got released, but yeah, I think they're in a bit of trouble if they're not.
But its price also dropped very quickly. So
correct. But when they talk about sales, they're talking about like dollars. So it's still made dollars wise top 5 game for a year, which is pretty impressive. But I think you only have so much goodwill, right? So this needs to work well, and I think eventually, I'd imagine it would be coming to the Switch. Like, that was the last thing I wanted to shout out, that they didn't mention it at all, but it's always been rumored for the Switch. But just sounds from the fact that they remastered it and really optimized it, maybe it won't come out to the Switch.
Yeah, I don't, honestly, we've seen the Switch struggle with games that were from the 360 PS3 era, which is just beyond me, but we've seen the Switch struggle with that. So it doesn't surprise me if they've upscaled all these, just like they did, for instance, with Dark Souls Remastered. The version that the Switch got is closer to the original Dark Souls than what the Xbox One and PS4 got. So
yeah, that's true. All right,
It's
well,
a shame though, because for people that only have a Switch, it would have been great. But yeah. Maybe
yeah,
they'll get a
and maybe they'll
streaming
do it
version.
exactly. Maybe they'll do it via the cloud. Like honestly, that is an option now when you look at it. It's going to be interesting to see how Control goes. I haven't heard too many reports outside of what we had last week. But let's get into, I think, really kind of like the only real Xbox, or one of the only Xbox Series exclusives, the Medium. And there's a few bits of news here. So the Medium, which was unfortunately for them due to come out on the 10th of December, which I imagine being that team, 10th of December, this is when the games, like no other games coming out on the 10th of December. Sweet, we've got like a little window for this horror game, which also, you know, you kind of need to have a bit of space for these horror games, you know, like you've even seen it with Resident Evil, and they're starting to release them in like February, just so they get out of the window of other games. And then the biggest game of the year, the number one game of the year, Cyberpunk 2077, randomly issues another delay and lands on the 10th of December. And this poor game is just like, are you kidding me? Because I think if you're launching on the 10th of December, that's almost the last day you can launch for the Christmas window, essentially. And yeah, they've announced that they're delaying the game. Now, whether they say they're delaying it because of COVID or whatever, I don't really buy any of that. I just look at this as...
But they did say the current schedule of other titles, so they at least owned up to that. They didn't completely ignore it.
Sure. But yeah, they're delaying it and they're pushing it out to January 28th. So for Australia, just after Australia Day. So that's the Thursday. Yeah, so it's a bit of a shame because like this was one of the games that, you know, was a exclusive experience on Xbox Series, and I could actually have seen it had been like a bit of a cult hit potentially, like if it lands well, you know, because always these horror games are like that. So yeah, it's a real shame. I like, you know, just from moving it out, like do you think that's the right decision? Or
I think getting the hell away from Cyberpunk is a very wise decision. It's obviously going to... We'll never know exactly how well it would have sold versus, you know, when it does come out, but like, just imagine, like, nobody is going to be talking about this game when it hits December the 10th. Nobody. They had to get out of the way of this. They had to.
But maybe no one's going to be talking about it in January 28th either.
But yeah, that's very true. But the other thing is, you know, it also gives them more time to fine tune it. So I think, you know, it'll probably launch as a better product for it. Which will mean that, you know, which means we'll probably get better reviews, hopefully get more buzz. I mean, the Bloober team have a good history. You know, Laser Fear is very popular and stuff. So I think this will end up being a game that will probably live or die on how well you know, it goes on Twitch and YouTube and stuff, because horror games always, you know, people love watching people's reactions to games. So honestly, this game actually does look pretty cool. It's just, we've talked about horror games before, they're just not my jam. They have to, even something like Eternal Darkness, you know, on the GameCube, that was definitely not a super scary game, but still I liked its gameplay. But if it wasn't for the whole Lovecraftian stuff, the horror's just not my jam. So
yeah, and I mean, this game does look pretty damn scary, right? And I'm still torn a bit about whether they should have moved it or not. It sounds like they weren't able to bring it forward, because that would have been one option. And I do feel like you probably can't push it out any further than December 10. And you're going to be in that massive wake that Cyberpunk's going to have, right? Like, it's not like Cyberpunk, it's going to release and then no one's going to talk about it. I feel like the whole month of December is just going to be Cyberpunk, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, and then it's going to be like, hey, when people get a Series X or a PS5 for Christmas, it's going to get another bump up because Cyberpunk's just going to be a game that people want to play on the new consoles. And it's going to be the definitive way to play it, let's be real. So, yeah, like, I guess logically it does make sense, and you couldn't bring it forward. It would have been great if they could have brought it forward. So like that, I think that's the way that I would have tried to do it, but
so you mentioned,
I don't know how close they were.
So you mentioned it's going to come out just after Australia Day, so that means Australians are going to really enjoy this game.
Yeah, well, maybe. So it got submitted to our classification board, and it got rejected instantly. Now, what I understand from that, and just reaching out to some industry insiders on it, it seems like they probably have made a mistake in submitting the form itself. So it's not necessarily that the game or the content of the game, because Australia has unfortunately and infamously a very rich history of refusing games, not kind of basically viewing games as for kids. So anything mature, they either refuse classification or require game developers and publishers to significantly censor games to ridiculous points.
So
Very, very much funny. What was it? Was it South Park that they did a massive send up in the physical game, like in the actual game itself?
so good. I love it.
Which is one of the greatest things ever. You check it out on YouTube. Just search for like Australian government censorship, South Park. They've put it in the game itself, describing what you're missing out, given that you're playing it in Australia. So this game, they've already said that they're resubmitting it. But it is a scary game, so I'm not sure, if games would get banned these days because of that. But it is a, mature game in the States as well.
Yeah, so ever since they introduced the 18 rating, which was, I remember back in uni, I even did I even did like a talk on that stuff because that's how ridiculous it was getting. Now, generally, the reason they might refuse classification is for generally two reasons. One is depiction of drug use, and
no, it's not drug use. It's the drug use that gives you benefits.
Yeah.
So you can use drugs, and if it means you're weaker, it's okay. But if you use drugs in Australia in a game and you get stronger or more like quicker or whatever, it's not okay.
And the other reason, I'm not talking also about games that are obviously like just have content that's just ridiculously like like something like I forget the name of it, that game where you went up as a mass murderer shooting everyone, like games like that. I'm not talking about stuff that are obvious.
Like Postal?
No, it wasn't Postal. It was something else.
Oh, okay.
And it was and sexual violence, so anything to do with rape and stuff like that.
That's true.
That's why. Oh my god, I can't remember any names of the games.
But even those kind of games are starting to get banned on Steam.
Anyway, So, but interestingly enough, a game that I really like, Risen. Risen was refused classification in Australia. So Risen is an RPG by Piranha Bytes. So I'm a big fan of them. Super Eurojank. They're almost like the connoisseurs of Eurojank. And the reason why Risen was refused classification is because there's one mission in the game where you're in like it's like a monastery sorts, but it's kind of like part of a guild quest line or something. And you have to. There's these like it's like their version of weed, basically, right? So it's like a reed, reed that's in the water, but they turn it into like something you can smoke. And there's a thing where you actually have to pass that out as kind of like you're acting as like a bit of a dealer in the monastery to then, continue a quest line, and it got banned because of that quest. It's a shame because like it was, and the way it was, they definitely didn't depict anything about negative or positive there. So it was also a small publisher and developer, so they probably just didn't have, it wasn't worth it to fight it in Australia at the time. So,
so it never got released, or?
Oh yeah, I had to import it from the UK. So.
Oh my god, that's crazy.
I don't know if it's since been released and available, let's say, on Steam and stuff like that. But for the 360, it never got officially released in Australia. But because it was a power-reaching game, you could just get it from the UK. It's fine. It's not like I was going to stop by the border police over importing Risen. So,
from what I understand, also when you're submitting these things, just listening to developers talk about it, especially indie ones, it's like you basically need to describe all the things that you believe may trigger them to, give it certain ratings, and it's kind of up to you how you frame it as well. So I do wonder, with especially the European developers, when they're submitting these things, whether they're just very like casual about it and not reading the markets, like in terms of whether they ban things or not. Sort of like, hey, he turns this into, some kind of drug and it gets more powerful or not powerful or whatever. And then they just read that and go, wow, this is a clear breach of what we're doing. Whether maybe they could have written it in such a way that they could kind of like get around it,
Because
supposedly... Yeah, go on.
No, I was just going to say, because you look at that quest and then you compare that to GTA Chinatown Wars and Nintendo DS, where there are missions where you're actually delivering cocaine or heroin. I can't remember which one it is. Like, it is 100% the same like concept. It's just one is obviously a much bigger, it has much bigger weight behind it. And people, as you said, probably know how to submit this stuff in a way that's
Exactly.
get it.
Exactly. It's the art of framing these things in a way that obfuscates them. So, and it's also for them to then turn around and go, well, they said you're delivering a package, and then they said, well, the prior mission, the package is drugs, so they forgot to mention that's what you're delivering in that one. So, yeah, no, it's interesting. It will be interesting if this game gets refused because there's easy ways to get around getting it, and I think it will make it more attractive for people in general if it gets banned because they'll probably have the angle that it's so scary that it's got banned in Australia. Well, yeah, let's get into some business news. So, Take-Two. So, there's confirmation that they're in talks to acquire Codemasters. We mentioned it before around Dirt, and then also with the F1 and Project Cars franchises. This is a specialty for this developer. So it's interesting. Do you know what some of the drivers are behind why Take-Two is looking at acquiring Codemasters?
I have no idea about the drivers, but Codemasters always kind of occupied this weird space in the industry. Like, as an Australian, that also, I'm half of my family is English, half of my is Australian, and so I also spent quite a few years in England as a kid. And Codemasters are just, they're a legendary developer in the UK. Like we're talking about the Dizzy games, Micro Machines, and stuff like that.
Micro Machines. Remember back in the day when we would play that, and then you share an actual physical controller? It's like half the controller. People wouldn't understand this. Half the controller, so like the D-pad, and then the bumper, so the left, it's like drive and then steer, and then the right side, which is like your four face buttons, and then the bumper is like the other person's ability to drive their own car. So you could play like 4-player with only 2 controllers. That's so cool.
GDQ when they do like 2 people playing the same controller and they do half. It was like that, but like built into the game. It was so cool.
Yeah, that was so sick, dude. I love Micro Machines. It's such a cool game.
But like the Dizzy franchise is something that like is such a classic UK series. James Pond and all that games that just really probably didn't make a huge mark outside of the UK. So Codemasters, like Bitmap Brothers and all these kind of other UK developers, even like I can't remember, never been able to pronounce it, but like Signosis and DMA Design. Like it's interesting because DMA Design essentially became Rockstar. So this isn't the first UK developer that Take-Two have actually acquired. So I definitely think it makes sense. I don't know the how much those franchises sell, but they obviously do well enough to keep Codemasters in business for a long time. So I think they're essentially going to corner the driving. Not that Dirt's really a sim, but the driving sim market basically, with the exception obviously Forza and Gran Turismo. So
yeah, because I know that you probably don't notice this, but when you jump into random games, and I felt this when I played Watch Dogs Legion 2, where the driving physics in it were so random.
Watch Dogs Legion 2? You mean Watch Dogs 2?
Oh, Watch Dogs 2. Sorry, yeah, sorry. Watch Dogs 2.
It's getting ahead of the correction.
Yeah, good. So when you jump in cars in that game, it just feels odd. Like it doesn't feel like a car, like at all, or even a video game car. And listening to Psyonix, because they used to do a lot of support for companies, and they've gone on to make Rocket League. But Psyonix, they used to do support for studios and developers, where it's like, we'll do all the car stuff and you do the regular game, because it's such a niche thing.
And all that, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm just looking through the library of Take-Two games, and actually, because from a business perspective, and Take-Two is a mega business, they're probably looking at it and going, we don't really have a clear offering in that space, like in the sort of car genre. So they're just going through it, they don't. That I can see at least.
Think of is whether or not there's any legacy teams or developers within Rockstar, because Rockstar have worked on the Midnight Club series.
Yeah.
So whether or not there's people that stuck around and they, handle, GTA 4 was infamously bad driving, but they've since improved those. So I wonder if they still kind of have legacy there. I honestly, it makes sense that Codemasters actually do a new Midnight Club. I reckon that'd be really cool. But obviously they've got their own franchises like, F1 and Dirt, are pretty big names. Definitely not into F1, but we know, Mike is huge into his driving sims. So the interesting thing for me is whether or not the influence of 2K or Take-Two, which, would influence 2K as well, would then start to seep into these franchises, like the
Of course.
heavy microtransactions.
Of course, dude.
NBA 2K. So I think there's positives and very possible negatives of this. But if we have I don't know. Maybe there's information out there about in how stable a position Codemasters was. Did it make sense for them to do this really from a business standpoint? It sounds like it probably is, but it's also not confirmed. But I mean, Take-Two have put a press release out basically stating that they're pretty much going to make this acquisition. So
yeah, once it gets to this point, it's going to happen. It only at this point when they go out with these press releases, just having spent time in this sort of space, you pretty much are only not doing this deal if there's a huge macro thing that happens with the economy, or more likely there's a regulatory issue. And that probably crops up more when you're talking about international jurisdictions, but it actually seems like they might be, incorporating in the same country potentially. So yeah, I can't imagine this not going through. And just looking at it now, I think there's a few things. There doesn't seem to be a very clear car game in the suite for Take-Two. And then also you landed on a really good point around the F1. I played F1 2018. It's a pretty decent game, but it doesn't feel like a 2K game where it's just, a wash with, microtransaction monetization, all that kind of thing. I think, they're probably looking at that going, well, we can monetize the hell out of this F1 game in a much, much better way than what they're doing currently, which for me is the right thing, what they're doing, and how they're making that game, and maybe even with the Dirt series as well. So yeah, and then, the left field thing could possibly be, hey, these guys understand how to do cars, and the biggest game on the planet, which is Grand Theft Auto, and they're developing Grand Theft Auto 6. Cars is a huge part of Grand Theft Auto. So I know they're not talking about doing a sim, but, even having people who can support you with that kind of stuff for the biggest game on the planet is, probably a logical thing to do.
It is, but I think with the GTA Online has actually had a big focus on driving in a lot of it. So I guess not on obviously the mods and stuff, but even in the official things that they add to the game. I wonder if they're already covered by that, but I understand what you're saying. It makes sense. Just like Ubisoft shares teams to that focus on different things to do different parts of games. But yeah, going back to I reckon a new Midnight Club would be cool, because that is a very different style of game that doesn't cross over past Dirt, F1 or Project Cars. Much kind of stylish, street racing game and stuff. So.
Yeah, no, definitely, awesome. Now let's chat about Nintendo. They're just absolutely smashing it with the console sales. So they just had their quarterly results, and the numbers are just pretty astronomical. I think just generally for this generation, outside of the Xbox One, the numbers have been massive and way bigger than anyone expected. But even with that, man, these numbers are just ridiculous. Just in the one quarter that they had, they'd sold 6.8 million Switches, now bringing it up to about 70 million. So it's 68.3. So about 70 million Switches are out there. And Animal Crossing has just been bonkers. So it's sold, now that we know the numbers, because it's the digital and the physical numbers, Animal Crossing itself has sold 26 million units in 6 months.
That's insane.
Which is you just cannot believe it. And then the thing that blew me away with that is, because they finally, also confirmed the numbers around, what the total sales are for the games. So Nintendo has a weird list of games that they show, and it's up to them how much they want to show or not show with this kind of stuff. But they have a list of Switch sellers that are about over 1 million, and remarkably, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is still in front of Animal Crossing. Now, I probably would have bet that, it would have fallen behind finally, but no, Animal Crossing is still number 2, which is just also bonkers that they've now got 3 games that have sold over 20 million copies on a console that they're exclusive to as well, by the way. So like Smash, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and then also Animal Crossing, all over 20 million sales.
Exclusive. You say exclusive, exclusive to Nintendo, but I mean...
Yeah, exclusive to Nintendo. But when I say Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, that number... That, like I'm saying, that's exclusive to this console, the deluxe edition, and those numbers aren't incorporating the Wii U numbers.
Oh yeah. It is essentially the same game as Wii U with some.
Oh no, definitely is. But, I mean, hey, you can use 2 items. Come on, that's completely different.
But it's it's huge, and it's funny. I'm one of the holdouts on Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Like, we're probably pissing you guys off because you're all like, let's play Mario Kart. I'm like, I already spent so much money on a Wii U, I don't want to buy it again and spend so much money. Like, it's almost like that game. I never see that drop in price. Or why would they?
No.
Why would they drop it in price?
I think I picked it up digitally. The one sale it's had since it launched, which it was like $53.
Oh,
and that's the only time it's dropped to that amount, and then it went back up. So it's never gone down since.
So it's like, unlike something like Smash Brothers, which owns Smash Brothers for Wii U and Ultimate, like, they're very different games. So as part of me, it's like, man, I loved Mario Kart 8 though. It's not like Breath of the Wild situation where it didn't click with me. I love Mario Kart 8. It's I think it's probably the best Mario Kart. But
oh, really? Interesting. We have to do that one day. Rank all the Mario Karts.
I think I need to bite the bullet. Next time I see it on sale, I'll have to pick it up, I think.
Yeah, I'll let you know. So normally with Nintendo, with their sales, they have 2 times during the year that they do it, and Christmas is one of the times that they're consistently doing sales, and for first party. So probably keep your eye out on it around that time. Yeah, these numbers are crazy. And then the thing that I wanted to look at and talk about as well is just the trajectory of the sales. Because, when this launched, there were people who were laughing about the Switch, kind of going, this is not even going to sell like 20 million units. Nintendo's dead. They need to be a developer and sell their games on PS4 and Xbox, which they would be laughing right now.
Are they... Like, I remember when the first trailer came out, there was huge buzz about this. Probably not as much as the Wii. The Wii was like an anomaly, but this wasn't. And anyone, I remember, the people were talking about the Switch all the time when they did it. Like, unlike the Wii U, like, if people were thinking this is another Wii U situation, then they were completely ignorant, honestly.
Yeah, no,
this had buzz. This had buzz.
I think this had more buzz than the Wii, to be honest. I think the Wii exploded once people got it, and like, you couldn't buy it for like 2 years in America, and people saw it and they were like, "Wow, that's really different." Like, I don't get that. Like, that's... My mum can play that game.
Yeah, so I guess I'm factoring
once it came out, it went crazy.
Yeah, I guess I'm factoring that part in as well. But yeah.
And I mean, even the Wii numbers, we're just looking, and you can look at this stuff. Especially, there's really good analysts. And what a cool job. I'm in business, and this would be such a sick job. There's a guy, Daniel Ahmed. If you search for him on Twitter, he's like the preeminent video game analyst in my books now. He's at Nyko Partners. And he has a lot of connections into China. So that's kind of how he broke into the industry, sort of had all those really interesting numbers that are coming from China and just expanded from there. But, he's got some really cool charts, and just looking at the line and the sort of, the gradient of the Switch, it's pretty much straight on par with PS4, PS2 and the Wii. Like, it's running at that run rate. So it's really when they want to end the generation, I think that will be the longer, like the determinant factor. Because the thing about the PS2 that people forget, it's a number 1 seller. It sold about 150 million. they actually effectively delayed the launch of the PS3 and the 360 because of the GFC. So the PS2 had an extra 2 or 3 years that it probably shouldn't have had. And then also the fact that the PS2, by the way, a lot of people bought it just for the DVD functionality. So it's kind of one of those ones where it's you got to read through the numbers a little bit. But man, the Switch is just friggin' selling like bonkers.
I'd be interested to see where the 3DS, because the 3DS kind of, it started slow but then picked up huge. So I wonder, I don't know when that pickup was. Was it past the 43-week mark, which is, what we're talking about here? Because I kind of have a feeling it may have started to pick up around that time. Because I remember when it launched, it was definitely like, what is happening? No, it was almost like people it wasn't really, hitting it. Then it kind of, I don't know what it was, if it was a game release or whatever that just kind of, then sent it skyrocketing. But I wonder.
I mean, it was much. I just shot you the graph that shows you the chart out to 5 years worth of 3DS numbers, which is beyond what the Switch has done.
Yeah.
So it shows you the sort of gradient and the trajectory it's on. The 3DS, big part of it was when they dropped the price in the States. Like less so the way it worked here, but definitely in America it was overpriced. And that was like a year or 10 months into it, I think. And then it started picking up more momentum at that stage.
Okay.
But it never really was. It's quite an interesting one, the 3DS actually. It sort of, I think it gave people a lot of thought that gaming and portable gaming was dead. Because it was just, in terms of how many units it was selling per month, it was like half of what, the Nintendo DS sold, which... By the way, the Nintendo DS sold like bonkers numbers,
That's
like 100
crazy.
plus million.
Crazy.
Like faster than the Wii, which is like nuts when you think about it, right? And it sold like 130 or 140 million from memory, the Nintendo 3DS.
Yeah. The problem with that stuff though is I know you need to count it, but as soon as you start factoring in all the different versions, it kind of, it's like the Game Boy when people, the Game Boy Color was definitely a different thing. So I'm glad that people kind of treat that as a...
No, but they don't. They count that. They count that
that's
together.
wrong. That's wrong.
I agree. So like on that one, and this is real niche stuff we're talking about right now. But
what we're here for.
Yeah, no. So this, I get really into this stuff. I totally agree with you. I think it's wrong that Nintendo counts Game Boy, Game Boy Pocket, and Game Boy Color as one console, and I don't even think they've throughout time really given the numbers on the splits. Whereas the DS, I disagree with you. I think it's completely fine to count them all together. Like I wouldn't expect to see a separated count for Xbox One, Xbox One X. Like it's the Xbox One generation. Like you can buy an Xbox One game, it will work on any of them. I get with the DS. There were like 4 games or whatever it was that had to have the DSi. And then same as like the 3DS. With the new 3DS, there's like a handful of games that need to have the new 3DS for it to run. But it's a generation, man. Like you got to count them all together. It's just revision.
The Game Boy Colors are worse though, because there was a lot of games that were only playable on Game Boy Color.
Correct. Yeah, and I think they're cheating because there's a bunch of those games as well that would work if you plug them into the Game Boy itself. So, there was 3 types of games. There was Game Boy, Game Boy games, Game Boy Color games that had a mode that you could still plug it in to the Game Boy and it would work. And then there was strictly Game Boy Color games that wouldn't even work at all. So, yeah, I think it's wrong that they include the Game Boy Color sales, but I'm fine with the DS ones. Yeah, it sold 150 plus million, the DS. I've always been a huge believer in the Switch and its viability. Just it feels a niche that people really didn't identify. And I don't see it not getting past 100 million sales. Like I feel like it's up to Nintendo if they don't want it to be 100 million sales.
So if they release a Switch Pro or something that is more powerful, that there's some games that will only run on it, they're going to count that as part of the Switch sales, aren't they?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
But my theory is what's going to happen is they'll have a Switch Pro. And I still believe that will be next year. And I don't think there'll be any exclusive games on it. but I think effectively there will be. You know what I mean? So I think games will work on the Switch, but it will just run like just absolute shit that people feel like you have to play it on the Switch Pro, which I think will be fine because I think those games that are like that are going to be the ones that aren't like the family games. So people will kind of know that. And then I think, you know, we're talking maybe about 5 years from now or 4 years from now, I feel like they will release a revision of the Switch, like, you know, let's just keep it simple, but like, you know, the Switch U that will play all the Switch titles.
Can you imagine? Switch
So that
U.
will be the one. That would be funny.
How amazing would it be? Because I don't think they would, but Nintendo definitely poke fun at themselves. How awesome would be to have an April's Fool Switch U? Like,
do you want me to give you? I'll give you a prediction. I'll give you a prediction. This is like, I don't know, maybe this is a really common prediction, but this will be my prediction. And Nintendo is just so crazy they'll do something stupid like this. They'll release like in 4 years the Switch VR. So it's like it can be played as a Switch, but then you can mount it onto like a headset that like plays VR. So it's the same unit, but it's like a VR display, and then it can also be just a regular display.
Well, what do you mean? They've already got VR. It's called Labo VR.
Yeah. No, honestly, I think they'll take that concept with Labo, and they keep on. You know, Nintendo, one thing you have to give to them, they always want to do something different. And I just can see them going, you know, down that path of like wanting to, you know, do a VR thing in a very Nintendo way, I'm sure. So, but yeah, like they'll be down the track. But yeah, I think they'll definitely count the Switch Pro sales, and they'll get a stack of sales, man. They can keep selling this thing for like 4 years.
I'm seeing it right now. So, you know, you've got the Game Boy, right? Mm-hmm. Then they go, okay, VR is virtual. So they call it the Virtual Boy.
Yep.
That's it. That's what they're going to do.
Oh, you idiot. It's like such a lame joke. And then, you know, like the one thing I'll shout out about the sales figures, like I know one of my most beloved franchises, Metroid, it just doesn't sell, right? Like at all. Like the best seller ever is like nothing compared to like, you know, the Animal Crossings of the world, the, you know, S tier, you know, Nintendo franchises. But Xenoblade, I'm kind of shocked that they keep going back to the Xenoblade well when it's selling like 2.4 million copies, like Xenoblade 2, and then the definitive edition sold like 1.3 million copies.
Those sales numbers aren't like, you got to remember, there's a lot of different levels of games in terms of sales and stuff. And those numbers aren't actually that bad for, you know, we're talking mid-tier games here in terms of franchise and stuff. You know, they would love, obviously, to be able to sell 20 million copies of Xenoblade, but they know they're not going to. So it's all about, I think, trying to, you know, like some of that stuff is also about just really, you know, building out a really good, you know, range of games. And I don't know the budget that goes into making the Xenoblade games with, oh my God, I can't remember the developers behind Xenoblade, but Monolith, that's it. So I'm sure the development costs are nowhere near probably what, you know, some other, you know, big titles are. So
yeah, I don't know. Like so these are just my insanely rough numbers, right? So like, you know, if it's selling like 1.3, I guess that's unfair because that's a remaster. So just going to Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which is a new game on the Switch, you know, if it's selling, you know, 2.5 million units, and they're probably realizing like, you know, $50 US per copy, because they do sell at like a high price in America, or maybe more like $45. Like once you know, take away some of the costs, it's like about $100 million revenue that they're getting in the door. I reckon they probably got like 80 people working on it, 150 grand ish each US, 4 years. That's about 50 million. I guess that's not a bad profit.
But then
it just feels like risky, you know?
So, you know.
What was that?
Then you got to factor in marketing and all that stuff. So
yeah, for sure. Like, I guess where I'm coming from is just they're not cheap games to make, and they're not like selling like crazy, you know. And you know, the biggest one that I wanted to call out is Fire Emblem. Like that is not sold that well at all. Like, yeah, it's just kind of interesting. Like, you know, whether they seem to love Fire Emblem and they just want to keep persisting with it now. Although, like they were thinking about killing it, like a few, like 10 years ago. So I really think it could go down that path again, Fire Emblem, because it's just really not selling that well. Like I'm just looking at the list, and it's just so far down the list. It's crazy. Like they don't even publish the sales anymore of Fire Emblem because it's just not selling on a quarterly basis. So
But if you start to look at, outside of Nintendo, like those sales numbers are not out of the ordinary for games like that. That's just the nature. Like they aren't wide appealing games.
no, I get it. It's just like for them, like you've seen what Nintendo does. They do shelve franchises that don't work, like F-Zero, right? They just don't sell as well as they want it to. And the thing is, what's going to make more money? Like an Animal Crossing spin-off that the team behind Fire Emblem could work on, or a Fire Emblem game. Like at the moment, unfortunately, probably the Animal Crossing spin-off would make more money.
I've got another idea. Okay. How about Animal Crossing Muso game?
That'd be really cool, actually.
That's it.
That would be cool. I reckon people would love that. So I was thinking of like a Animal Crossing tactics game.
No. Get Ninja was it Ninja Team or what? No, it's not Ninja Team, that's very different. You get a Koei Tecmo working on a Animal Crossing Warrior.
Jesus. All right, I think we've got to straighten up because we've got some serious topics ahead. So Celeste creator Maddy Thorson has written a blog. So I don't know if you knew much about this. Like I knew prior to this blog that Maddy, had come out as trans. So this was like last year, I think, from memory. Just because it's someone that I follow on Twitter, and she's written a blog just around that. Not only is she trans, but that the protagonist in Celeste, which is one of the indie darlings of the last couple of years, is also trans, which is quite interesting. It's a really, really interesting article. We'll link it in the show notes and on the YouTube clip as well. But yeah, it was really fascinating to read about her journey of sort of, just starting the game, not having this realization about herself or the protagonist of the game. And then it wasn't really until the game was completely finished, like with the DLC, that she sort of started to realize, and then she sort of started telling her friends and coming out as trans, and then also to the wider community. So yeah, it's just really kind of a fascinating article. No negative backlash that I can see, thank God. But it's also just interesting to me how a creator can create something that is a bit of a manifestation of their own subconscious without realizing, and then turns out that they've made an assessment about some of the identity of a protagonist without them even knowing themselves that they kind of felt it was like that.
Yeah, this is a great article to read, and it's very personal. Really
super personal.
Huge credit to Maddy for laying it out there. And we know that whenever there's been backlash to, obviously we know that J.K. Rowling has very strong thoughts on the whole concept of gender identity and everything, but we know that when she came out and started to say, "Oh, Dumbledore was gay," blah blah blah, you had all this backlash of people saying, "Wait, don't go back in to your work and your art and try to add these things in." So I'm really glad that this has been, that people haven't taken it that way, that it's people have understood that this is actually as you said, it's almost kind of a manifestation throughout the development, to then realize, okay, this is why I was so confused at the time. And why these things are so important is because it was so personal. So I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I know that the community had it's been a long thing where they've been talking about, wanting clarity on this, and they didn't outright come out and say it in the DLC that they added, and I think that's actually really great, because to me that would almost be like, well, we need to say this because there's people are expecting it. No, like,
Yeah.
The fact that, obviously Maddy said this in the blog, which I think, is good, but, to go out there and put it in a piece of text in the game would have probably felt very tokenistic and wouldn't have fit probably the game as well. So I think it's really, really good. And I really like the quote that Maddy put in the article, which is, they didn't want it to be like Samus removing the helmet at the end of Metroid to reveal that, surprise, you were trans woman all along. I think that's a really great line, because it's, as I said, it's obviously important to the game, but like I remember back when they put out new Baldur's Gate DLC, well after the original Baldur's Gate came out, and people were, some corners of the internet, we know the types were very, were harking about, forced diversity, blah blah blah. And I think one of the issues was that, you meet one of the characters in there, and one of the first things they say in the first dialogue is, they start talking about that they're, that they're trans. And so I think that the way they did it with Celeste was really great. And by the way, I don't agree with that at all. It was just just remember it. This kind of made me think about that when you start having people kind of, say, oh, look, why is that the first thing someone mentions? But I think this is really, really good, that, and this article, as I said, it's very personal. And having played through, oh my God, Tell Me Why, that's it. I can't think of any game titles this week. Tell Me Why, which, the had a trans protagonist, and gender identity was very central to the story and the themes. I think it's really good. It's, representation is one of the strongest form of, of helping people come to grips with, the fact that they're going through these, troubles in life. Because while I can't speak firsthand, I imagine it is very tough to go through and have to, come out and things like that. So it's really good to have people in art and media and characters and representations that represent you. I think it's really important.
Yeah, and I should actually correct myself, because I was sort of referring to Maddy as she, whereas they're actually non-binary, so that's more of a they-them type of thing. Which, it's kind of like this whole thing. It's like getting accustomed to the language as well, and just accommodating people, and getting to feel okay with themselves. I mean, I don't have that much experience. Like, the one thing, and I don't think we've actually spoken about this, but my aunt was like, and I'll frame this in a way that actually, I don't know how to say this in a way that's not offensive. So my uncle came out as trans, so now it's my aunt, like a few years ago. And I remember talking to her, just about the whole thing. So she's like, what would she be? Like almost 70, right? And it was really actually super fascinating to me, just going, hey, like, how long did you feel like this? Like, I asked so many stupid questions, but I feel like how you get to learn about these things otherwise. And then she's just straight up like, hey, I always felt like this, but there was kind of like no language for that back then. Like, that just wasn't something that was in the realm of possibility or just reality. You know what I mean? Like, you just don't have the words for what you are and, what's driving you. So personally, it was like super eye-opening to me. Like, I've always been, and I think we're pretty similar in this way, but I won't speak for you, but I've always been one of those people that sort of like, look, it doesn't affect me or it doesn't impact me, and it means a lot to that person. So why would I have a strong view almost one way or the other? It's like, I feel like these are genuinely held views that someone's had. So, I'll be behind them and support them in what they want to do and, what makes them feel comfortable, because I think it's extremely reasonable, the requests that people have of just sort of going, hey, this is who I am and this is how I identify myself. It's like, okay, like, it doesn't bother me and, that's good for you. And then, to be honest, I don't think I would be brave enough to be able to do that, even if I felt like that. I think I'd just be one of those people that just, wouldn't feel comfortable like going out to everyone, and I really hope that changes with time.
Yeah.
But yeah, like outside of that, haven't had much experience.
Yeah, and also just, the actual process of transitioning, while it's obviously very different for different people, is, by all accounts, really tough. Not just on the mental side, but the physical side as well. And it's, I have so much respect for people that are able to go through that and obviously come out, on to everyone else about it. It's would be so tough. There's just think about, so for some people, they'd probably feel like it's the biggest secret that they can't tell anyone, and just think about the biggest secret you've got, that you don't want to tell anyone. Like, just to tell people that would be super tough. So, I think this is a fantastic blog article, and I really look forward to the. Not sure if they're working on a new game at the moment. You'd hope so. So I'm really looking forward to the next game. I still got to play through Celeste, so I think this is probably a good a good thing to get me onto that and stop watching GDQ runs instead. So
yeah, and it's a part of Xbox Game Pass, getting back to gaming. And I think given the history of I don't even know what to call it now, because they kind of have a studio, and the studio's name was Matt Makes Games, and they want to change the name. I don't know what they're going to change the name to, but they don't really make sequels, that crew of people. Like, it's quite an interesting and eclectic crew of people. It's like some Brazilians and Canadians and all over the place. So they make fantastic games. So yeah, and like one thing I just wanted to touch on before we move on was just, to me, like, I think Celeste itself and just this story sort of, helps elevate gaming to a higher art form than I think what a lot of people think of it as, in terms of, hey, it can't get to the level of something like movies or books. I think, the fact that the game itself is a bit of a metaphor for, climbing up a mountain, getting through something, persevering. And then, you hear this story about its own creator kind of, replicating that, art sort of imitating life and life imitating art. I think it's just like something that's unique to games in this way of the way it's been expressed. And, I hope, and I so far see that, everyone supports them. And, I think it's just, it's a must read article if you're sort of, into this more artsy fartsy style stuff in gaming. I think it's well worth reading.
We need more games like Celeste, and we need more stories like Maddy's.
Yeah, definitely. Well said. All right, well, this is impossible to segue. But, another thing that really caught my eye this week, PT. So PT being the demo for Silent Hills, effectively. The context here, and I think most people know about it, but it is quite a funny one where, Konami basically had a Silent Hills game in development with Kojima, and it was going to star Norman Reedus. They just shadow dropped a demo, and it's basically just a room, and it's a real small snippet of what the game was going to be. And, it was built as an interactive teaser rather than them releasing a teaser itself. So this experience was on the store, massive amount of reactions to it, people really getting into it. And then with all the fallout with Konami and Kojima, and, we won't get into that now, but there was massive fallout between those two parties, and they pulled this demo or this teaser from the store. And then now people are in this mad scramble to, maintain this teaser, because, to preserve it. And what people discovered was you could actually transfer it to a PS5 and it would work on a PS5. So people had it working on a PS5, and then there was an update that was pushed just the other day. So these are on review, obviously, review units of PS5s. There was an update that Sony had to the firmware to the PS5, and all of a sudden PT no longer worked. And by the way, you can't download PT, obviously, because Konami has pulled it. So Sony had to come out and explain why, and they just described it as a publisher decision. So Konami has pulled PT from even being able to be playable on the PS5. So it's not even downloadable. It's just the people who have had it on their PS4 can actually put it on the PS5. So what did you think about this Konami move?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to also mention how influential PT's actually been. So not only has it been a huge influence on independently developed horror titles that generally come out on PC and Steam and that, but it's very possible, I don't know if we ever had confirmation that it also influenced the decision to make Resident Evil 7 first person.
Oh, interesting.
That was a lot of the discussion at the time, but, again, who knows? Like, games take a long time to develop, so. But yeah, in terms of this move, like a lot of things, I'm in two minds. First of all, Konami's in their full right to do this, right? It's not
correct.
This game was a demo for another game that never happened, and a game that also has, it's a sore spot for Konami. I imagine anything to do with Kojima around that time frame.
Oh yeah, they hate him now.
And the fact that he also went on to do Death Stranding with Norman Reedus. And they have yet to release a new fully fledged Silent Hill game since then. So they, or many games since then.
Or any, right. Yeah. Or practically any good game.
But the other side is obviously, caring about, people that actually like this. It's not a long game. And chances are, look, anyone that wanted to play PT and experience everything that's in that, that demo has played it by now. There's also people that have made, like, I don't know if they've been taken down, I don't know, Konami cares, but people have made like Unreal Engine PT versions of PT that are playable on PC, so there's ways to play it outside of that. Obviously not 100% accurate probably, but pretty close. But the thing is that obviously it sucks that it's something that was just doable, and it's just a publisher decision to remove it. So, from a conversation standpoint, it kind of sucks, but it's kind of like, well, you can still play it on your PS4. I don't think it's honestly a huge deal, but it is Konami kind of just being Konami and just being a bit of a bitch about it.
Yeah, and just looking at like Konami's output for the last like 5 years, dude. Like, it's bloody woeful.
It's almost like we had a whole segment talking about Konami in the early episodes.
I know. But just revisiting it, it's just like, it's quite shocking,
What episode? I'm just looking at what episode we talked about, if anyone wants to hear.
It's quite early on, I think. It was one of the first 5, I reckon.
Yeah. You keep talking, I'll find what episode it was.
Yeah, so like, I'm kind of in the same camp as you, where it's totally up to them if they want to do this. Like, do I think it's like, do I see a situation where they say, oh, we couldn't even be bothered instructing Sony to not have it on the store? Yeah, totally. I could just see them saying, well, you can't even get PT anyway. It's not like new people are downloading PT, because you literally have to transfer it over for it to even work.
So we talked about it on episode 3, which is the first episode that got put up on YouTube, although I don't know if we've got a clip for that particular segment. But
no, we do. Because
okay.
What I did was I got the Konami video conference from E3, the really crazy one that they had. That's the B-roll for it.
So good.
I actually rewatched that whole thing because it made me laugh so hard. But yeah, like, outside of releasing what Super Bomberman R, they really haven't done anything for a long time, and just, the anniversary collections to make money.
Well, they announced some stuff during the Tokyo Game Show. I think they're making some anime action RPGs and stuff, but
sure.
Nothing that's gonna, like, excite the industry or sell.
Yeah, and let's not talk about Konami again, because I could go down that rabbit hole. But PT, I'd never played PT, and I actually was like, okay, I'll watch a trailer for it. Like, sorry, not a trailer, a gameplay, like someone playing it on YouTube, and man, that game is freaking scary as hell. Like, and I never really knew that much about PT, but playing Resident Evil 7, it feels very much like the same thing. So I didn't know the influence as much as like what you're saying. So
the likely influence, I'm not going to say it's 100% confirmed, but the likely, the really cool thing about PT is to even complete it properly. It's like it's some like 4/4 breaking stuff. You've got to speak into like a microphone. Like, it's crazy. Like, you've just how much they packed into that little playable trailer. Like, I don't. Kojima helms that trailer, but I can't say, if that was all, his cool ideas or what. Obviously, he's very, much into 4-4 breaking with, Metal Gear Solid and everything like that. But it was just, even to complete it was just crazy. Like, you love hearing about when something comes out and no one knows how to do anything. And so people, like communities on the internet, get together and they try to figure it out. Like Fez, like the puzzles in Fez, people like trying to brute force stuff, and then they come up with all these ways to try to, as a community, solve these puzzles. And that's what PT was during the first week of its release. So it was really cool. So it sucks that Konami have done this, but it's also, I mean, if they had done this to a fully fledged title that people had paid money for, I'd be way more annoyed.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. And I think the fact that it was just a teaser, it wasn't even like a demo really, it was just a teaser for the game.
Yeah.
It just like almost a concept of like a, vertical slice for the game. And it was like, because it is such a small like part of the game in a way, like what they actually had.
Well, it probably wouldn't have, that whole part wouldn't have been in the game. It's more like, exactly. Just as you said, like even a vertical slice is hard to say, because vertical slice usually assumes that kind of it's taking something from the game, and representing it. This, we don't know. Like, we have no idea what Silent Hills would have been. So, yeah.
Yeah, and looking at the timeline, so that's August 2014 when it was publicly released, PT. And then Resident Evil 7 came out like 3 years later, almost. Probably did have a bit of an influence on it, to be honest.
A lot of people talked about it back then, but I just don't know if it was ever officially confirmed. I don't think Capcom would come out to confirm it if it was the case, but yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because they were making Resident Evil 7 before that game, but you do wonder sometimes, you play that and then you go, oh, that's a pretty cool thing. Like, we need to add that, and that's the game making. Like, that's what it's all about. So it is spooky as hell. I don't know, man. Scary games, horror games. I struggle, dude. Seriously. I watched that PT gameplay. I wasn't even playing it. I watched it. And then I went downstairs and I couldn't find my son. I was like, where the hell is he? Where's he? Like, and he's like 3. And I opened the pantry and he was hiding behind the apron, but he just moved around really slowly. And it actually literally gave me a shock, like a fright. Like, I was like, oh shit. Like, and then I was like laughing my ass off so hard with him. And he was like laughing because he thought, well, he did scare me, so I'm pretty weak when it comes to horror games. Like, it's freaking spooky as hell. And my wife's even worse. She watched like the start of Resident Evil 7 where there's no jump scares, there's nothing, right? And I'm like, watch this. It's so freaky, this game. It's like ominous. And she started watching it and she's like, I can't watch it. It's too spooky. Like, just the way they build it up, like, it's so artful. Like, it's the same way as I love like vintage horror films where it's playing into your expectations about what's going to happen and when they're going to scare you. And that's kind of what's scary about it.
I remember when they first released the demo of Resident Evil 7, the VR demo, and essentially you're strapped to a chair in that demo in VR, and there's like a person that goes behind you that's like covers your eyes, and then like, oh my god, like watching people like in VR react to that, I'm like, oh, screw that, I'm never going anywhere near that. Just give me Astrobot in VR and I'll be happy.
Yeah, there's only 2 VR games I want to play, which are Astrobot and Half-Life Alyx. And Resident Evil 7 is always one, like, it would be cool, but I can't even play it on the PC. like I just think the VR thing, that would just spook the hell out of me too much. Yeah. And again, like, going into a pretty heady topic, just concerning Wreckful, or like as he's legally known, Brian Bernstein. So very like unfortunate circumstances, passed away this year. And, as always, they go along with these kind of segments. If you are struggling, make sure you do reach out to, your country's corresponding helplines. So like in Australia, Beyond Blue is one of the main ones that you'd reach out to. But yeah, like, we just want to discuss, the situation that's happening with this former streamer, Wreckful, that, his channel is actually still active on Twitch. And I was actually on it the other day, and there was still like 160 people on it, which is for Twitch not a low number. Like, yes, it's not like the thousands that he would have had previously. And he was a very famous WoW player, like number one in the world actually, and would build like characters that basically were not optimal just to prove a point that he's still number one. So quite an interesting character. But yeah, like it's just such an interesting situation. I'm not sure like what your thoughts are about it. There's a bit to get into in this one.
Yeah, so his channel is still active, and it's playing reruns of his VODs or past streams. And initially, when Kotaku had a big article on this, and when they start talking about it, you're like, wait, what a second. But then when you find out that that's actually what he had requested in the event that anything happened to him, is that he wanted his channel to go on. I don't know how specific he got, but I'd imagine it probably said by playing, VODs and stuff. And so he's got like a lot of big Twitch channels. He's got mods that that help out, and they've obviously they don't have full access to his channel, but they can at least assist in actually getting that stuff to play and take the place of obviously what would have been his live streams. So I'm really kind of it's as you said, it's a tricky thing, because if it wasn't for him requesting this, I would have been like, no, I don't feel that's right at all. But this is honoring his wishes, which at that point, what can you do? You have to kind of, if possible, honor his wishes. I don't know how much work it involves from those mods, and at some point, how long do they have to? Are they burdened by, not burdened, but how long are they kind of responsible for helping out with this? Maybe they want to keep trying, but from that article, it's pretty tough on them as well, because they're obviously huge fans, and to it, it's, I think the thing I really like about this is that he was very open, and I say this from the article, I didn't watch him at the time, but he's very open about his struggles with mental health, and I think it seems like has a lot of positives for people that kind of also help them be more open about it, and obviously raise awareness about mental health problems, which are obviously a huge issue worldwide. But also there's part of me that's like, it's very strange, and especially when you start talking about that, apparently still has a paid functionality on the channel, and Twitch have said that wherever possible they will provide access to that to family members, because I'm sure this is not, it's obviously not probably the first time that a streamer has passed away, but I don't know if this is the biggest profile one we've heard about. Obviously, we had Etika, the Nintendo streamer, very popular in the Smash Brothers community, pass away. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but I actually used to watch a lot of Etika's stuff. So I'm not sure what happened, and we should know what probably happens in the event when that happens, and if they pass the details on to the family or not. But it does seem a bit odd to me that Twitch just automatically doesn't kind of disable that stuff. But other than that, outside of that whole thing, which is probably a very complicated situation, if it really helps a lot of people come to grip with his passing, and also helps provide support for anyone that struggled from mental health as well as he did, then I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's
very complicated. It's very complicated.
It is, and Etika was last year, and I definitely think that this this streamer was probably the most high profile streamer where this situation is eventuated, and it's starting to become an all too familiar situation, and probably reflective that the leading cause of death, when you look at people who are like 16 to 28, is by their own hands, unfortunately. So given that streamers are generally in that demo as well, it's probably something that when you think through it, probably is not as surprising as it feels. I must admit, like when I saw this without knowing the details, like I did feel like it was in poor taste. at a minimum. And then, he started to learn more about it, and it's vexed, right? It's, massive that the fact that he's like, hey, I want this to continue. Like that's just something you need to consider. And then, I don't know what the family situation is, right? Like, not everyone's well off, and, who knows, maybe it's helping to support his family, or, because, he also had a kid from memory. So, like as a dad myself, like that's massive, right? If that's something where you look at it and you go, well, it's still supporting them, that's critical. Like, what, you want to take food out of their mouths because, it's bad taste or something like that. I don't think that's right either.
And you see this a lot with the wrestling industry has a lot of people that pass away very young for various reasons, and a lot of the time you'll see GoFundMes and you'll see charity things that are raised in support of the families. So I definitely agree that it's important in that regard. If there's money flowing into that channel, that it does reach them.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that's just so sad and unfortunate, and like mental health is, I'm so glad we're in a spot where even like me in my work, I just work in a professional company. I've seen a sea change since I started working in people talking about this issue, like to the point where people actually are now comfortable enough to say, I need a break. Like I need a mental health break, for a month or whatever. Like that's not actually seen as you do that and your career's over. Now, honestly, still is like at the upper echelons, one of those things where career's not over, but it's probably effectively over if you want to keep moving up the chain. But I mean, compared to what it was before, where it was like they'd probably try to actively get rid of people in these situations. Yeah, it's just such an unfortunate situation, and I don't even know where I land on it, to be honest. It's kind of one that I don't even want to think about. Like if I was the mods of Twitch, I'd just be like, Jesus, this is a tough one to assess.
Going back to Etika, because I don't watch a lot of Twitch streamers, but he's one of the few that I have actually watched on Twitch in the past, and I remember, I used to watch a lot of his YouTube content. Obviously, his Smash reactions. We went through our reactions to Smash trailers. He's legendary for for just how excited he got. I remember staying up watching like an all-night stream he did before the launch of Smash 4, and just seeing like all the information come out because they had live demos of the 3DS version for the first time. And so I was watching his live streams and everything, and I remember when reports started coming out about his behavior and the issues he was having. I remember actually watching him on Twitch a little bit, and now I just, there's that guilt part of me. It's like it was almost like watching someone that was unfortunately, in the process of kind of losing their way, and it's now I can't watch anything from him without kind of thinking about that. And that's where I think it comes back to Wreckful, is that I hope that this doesn't kind of have that impact on people. I hope that, for people that don't want to be reminded of his passing, that they don't have to see it pop up all the time, or I'm sure obviously they could unsubscribe, but then they may feel that they're actually letting him down by unsubscribing from his channel. So then they'd see his stream pop up on the home. I'm not sure, I don't use Twitch enough, but I'm sure then they'd see that, oh, this person is live, or this person thing is,
Oh yeah, definitely.
So it'd be a constant reminder in a situation where you may not want to be, but obviously if that's honouring what he wants, and for some people they really like this and use it as a celebration of his legacy, then it's a good thing. But I think it is, it's very complicated. I think it can have both positive and negative impacts on the people that followed him, but ultimately if they can honour his wishes, then that's probably the best thing to do.
Yeah, and I think that's a massive thing with mental health, because there's a huge debate, just chatting at work to some mental health professionals, not about me personally, but just like that concept. And we have people that present to wider teams, and just there is a debate raging on about how people talk about it. I think you and I have been very careful and as delicate as we can be to discuss this issue. And again, if you are struggling with these things, there are places that can help. And one thing I would say is don't just rely on friends. Like, friends are important, family's important, but they're not mental health professionals. And, my brother-in-law, he is a mental health professional, and he's had like 10 years of training. It's not something that you can just, lean on mates and then they can get you through it sometimes. Like, some of these things there are deep drivers because of this. And, it's just not something that many people are equipped to help you with. So there are plenty of places, in Australia, Lifeline's one of them, but there is this debate about how people talk about it and, is it positive or negative, kind of being so sensitive about it rather than being more direct about what it is and, the impacts that it has on people. It's a tough one, and it's a real sad situation. And I do hope with time, with more and more people openly discussing mental health issues, that people feel more comfortable reaching out earlier and hopefully preventing some of these situations from occurring. So yes, sad situation, and yeah, pretty complex one actually. Moving on to the bargain bin. As we do every week, we start with Epic Game Store, and our new policy has already had dividends. I don't know if you noticed, Swinny. Dungeons 3 is free at the moment. Is there something interesting about the fact that Dungeons 3 is free at the moment?
So there was a game that was shown up as being free for this week, last week, and normally we'd talk about the Epic games that are free this week and the ones that are coming up next week. And you mentioned, you know what, I'm sick of mentioning like next week because then we have to talk about it this weekend. We're just going to talk about what's available like for this week now. And I can't...
Oh, wait. Before you get to the punchline, what else did I say? You probably don't remember. I also said, and every now and then they change the lineup.
Oh.
I actually said that last week. Okay, every now and then they change the lineup. They might add a new free game, and then we have to talk about it anyway.
I was expecting adding. I wasn't expecting something to disappear because I can't see that game anywhere, and I can't even remember what it was called, but I can't see it anywhere.
Well, normally we would have it, but I deleted it. So Dungeons 3 is free right now. It's free for the week. And yeah, I can't even remember what the game was meant to be, but they had another game that was meant to be free and then they pulled it. But normally when they do that, that game will be free eventually. Like, I don't think there's been one single instance where they've done this. And they've done it many times before. I don't think there's been one single instance where they haven't then made it free eventually.
See, I didn't know that had ever happened. I'd assumed that if you put something up there, it's kind of like set in stone. So I didn't realize that could have changed in the...
Yeah, they've done it a few times. And that's what I started to get worried about, that they're going to do that on us one week where they say one thing and then it's not free. And it's like, it feels like I almost need to do a correction or something. So I'm glad that we didn't do it. Like, we changed it at the perfect timing. So Dungeon 3 is free at the moment. It's hard to say. Jump on Epic and get it now. With Switch, you had a few games that you wanted to call out.
Yeah, so there's some highlights. So first, Quest of Dungeons is 89% off. So I actually really like this game. It's a little rogue, very much a rogue-like. There's no persistent mechanics there, but you choose a class, you enter, and it's like you move square by square, explore dungeons and stuff, and get to the end after a run. Really cool. So that's 89% off until November 26th, and it's in Australian dollars or Aussie dollars, it's only $1.49. So that's really cool. My Time at Portia. So we talked about the sequel, My Time at Sandrock. So My Time at Portia last week. My Time at Portia is 75% off until November the 16th. Yoku's Island Express, which is a cool like pinball puzzle adventure game.
Pinball Metroidvania.
Yeah, pretty much. 75% off until the 16th. That's really cool. The Room, which seems to always been on sale. I'm sure maybe the other sequels and stuff are, but I'll just check this on because I'm playing through it at the moment. So The Room is 75% off until November 16th. That's only a few dollars, I think. That's actually a really cool first-person puzzle game where you have to like unlock all these puzzles in a box and stuff. Really, really neat to play on the Switch. The only annoying thing about it is that you have to use touch screen controls. So it's kind of like sometimes it doesn't like the setup that I want to do. I'm like, oh well, I can't really reach up to use it. So, but anyway. And the last thing I want to point out, and I didn't know about this game, but I've researched it now. Had you heard of Roombo First Blood?
No, but I'm surprised that they're able to even have that title. To be
I
honest.
love it. So Roombo First Blood is about a Roomba that is
What?
that is like you have to kill like the people in the house. It looks so fun. It's 60% off until the 30th of November.
Have you got it?
No, but I'm probably going to pick it up because it's only like
Yeah.
probably $4 or $5 or something. But it's it looks really cool. It may end up not being a good game, but just when I watched the trailer of Roombo First Blood, it's such a funny idea. It's like the Roombo sets up traps to kill the residents in the home and stuff. It's a cool.
Well, I
idea.
always find the Steam reviews to be the most accurate to what I like. And then I always have to adjust it if it's like some political thing as to why they got bad reviews. But it's got a very positive overall review.
There you go.
So that's good. That's really decent, dude.
Yeah, I don't know when it
So-
came out. I just saw it as in, maybe it's a new release game or it's been out for years. I don't know. Roombo First Blood just looks
2019 last year.
Just looks really funny.
So it's pretty recent. Yeah. Looks pretty cool, actually. I still cannot believe they've gotten away with 2 puns in that name. And neither company is like took them down. It's pretty impressive. For PlayStation, we don't really have anything to call out. Like we've already spoken about the games that are on PS Plus at the moment. Bugsnax is going to be the one that people pick up shortly, so that's going to be interesting. People's reception and Xbox.
Yeah, just one thing for this week for Xbox. So we've got a big addition to Game Pass as part of their new joint relationship with EA Play. I think it's EA Play. They keep changing the name in the past.
Yeah, I think it's EA Play now.
Is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is available
So good.
from the 10th, so in a couple of days. Now, so you mentioned, so this is definitely on the Xbox console Game Pass. I was confused. I was trying to find if it was on PC Game Pass as well.
So it's coming to the Xbox Game Pass for PC and for Xbox Game Pass Ultimate in December. So a lot of these titles are coming in December. So Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and also Doom Eternal is supposedly coming in December as well to PC.
Okay, so maybe we'll just mention it when that comes up in that week that it's available on the PC one.
We definitely will because I'll be playing them.
Yeah.
So like this is probably the first. This is a real test. I've got a 3-year trial and test with Game Pass Ultimate. This is probably the first one where I'm like, it's that good kind of like, this game's coming. It's the kind of, it's in that game that like, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Obviously that's been challenged in the last, 5 years, 6 years, with recent movies that are coming out. Mandalorian's fantastic. So that's kind of getting me back into it. But it came out, everyone said it's a really great game. It's one of those games that you probably add an extra point just because of Star Wars, if you're a big fan of Star Wars. And it's just also the kind of game I'm not going to go buy, like I can't explain it. It's just, I don't know, it's not the kind of game that will get me past a threshold to go, yeah, I will buy it, but I know I'd like it.
And it's basically Metroid Dark Souls. What can go wrong?
Yeah, no, exactly. And then now the fact that it's and mixed in with Uncharted, but the fact that it's free as part of, and when I say free, it's a part of the lineup of Game Pass is just awesome. And it's this experience of it's coming out. It's like, okay, cool. And I think the way I need to approach it is because they go off, I probably just need to go, all right, I'm going to start playing it when it comes out.
So
near to that.
I have a question about this, and I don't know if you know if it's the case. I guess I'll be able to check on the 10th, but to access this game, do I have to, let's say, sign up and hand over my details to EA? That's what I wonder.
No. Oh, it's a good question, actually.
And the thing is, it wouldn't stop me from playing this game. I just wonder if, like, I'm just curious to know is if part of this arrangement is that you also have to kind of like sign up to an EA account to be able to access these particular games, or does it just appear in the Game Pass library and you download it like any other one? I think I kind of questioned this maybe last time when we talked about it, but I just wonder. That's all. Yeah,
I don't think it's really clear at this stage.
yeah.
I think it's like it'd be one of those ones maybe we find out when it actually comes out, you know?
Yeah, so there's also a couple of just quick PSAs about some server shutdowns. I generally talk about these in regards to Xbox, so I'm not 100% about the PlayStation side, but we've got World of Tanks on Xbox One. The servers are shutting down on the 7th of December. So if you're keen to, I guess, get the most out of that game while you can and, possibly get all the achievements, then you've got until 7th of December to do that. And also Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, both the regular one and the Game of the Year edition, which is separate SKUs and achievement lists for Xbox One. Their servers are shutting down on 31st of December, but it's only one achievement that's affected. So one of those versions, I've actually got to get to that point to get that achievement. And that's just, hey, someone on your friends list has died to a certain enemy, so that enemy reappears in a map and you can get vengeance on them. So it's just that kind of part that you'll lose access to, or at least from an achievement standpoint. So just a couple of PSAs there.
Okay. And just going back to the EA Play stuff, like we'll know that pretty shortly, but I just skimmed through the T's and C's. It seems the way they've written it that it's just going to be a part of the Game Pass. Like you don't need to do anything extra. Okay. But you'll be able to test that out in the next few days, actually.
I wonder if there'll be sneaky, terms of service have been updated. You click agree, and as part of that, it's like, we will be sharing your information to EA. I reckon that's probably the way they'll do it.
Yeah, I'd be kind of surprised if they don't. Like, given it's EA, like EA is one of those publishers that, is on the extreme end of the kind of capitalist model.
Yeah.
And they're just like, hey, it's free data. I'm always shocked that in Epic, when you download the free game, the default is you don't send your details to the developer or publisher. Like, I can't believe that's the default. Like, I always double check it because I feel like they're going to flip that switch one day and I'm not going to notice it. And it's like, it's a double negative or something like that. So, yeah, it's interesting and we'll be able to check that out. But I cannot wait to play Doom Eternal and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order on Game Pass Ultimate. So, but on PC, on the superior platform, obviously. So yeah, we'll see how that goes when that happens. And let's get into a special where we thought this episode wouldn't run that long, so we can do a special.
Never happens. Never happens.
I know we might need to not fly through it, but so it's our top 3 most underappreciated games. So we each have a top 3. So I guess it's like a top 6, really. I'm calling it a top 3.
I will say that while we're saying top 3, like for me, it's probably more like 3 of my most, if that makes sense. I kind of wanted to represent different things as part of this list. So
okay, interesting.
Yeah, so we'll get to it.
And so again, we often do this, and it can cause a lot of drama, or not drama, a bit of hilarity at the time. We have not shared like what each other's lists are. So I actually said, what happens if we have the same game? And you said, no, there's no chance of that. So, okay.
Oh, so very unlikely, it's not.
I think it's not going to happen. The other one is, we had this discussion, before going live around underappreciated versus something like underrated. And it's very much underappreciated. So the way I would think about that is, you could even almost argue something like Control could turn into that, where it rated very highly. It has not sold well. It still hasn't sold well. And who knows, maybe in 10 years' time, if it doesn't have a remake or anything, I'd probably put it in the underappreciated category.
Yeah, and the way I kind of, like in my head, I think of it is that no one really talks about these games. Especially there's definitely one on my list that no one ever talks about, but it's just no one really talks about these games. They just don't come up randomly in conversation. They don't come up in many lists that you see on the internet. And like I'm so like, and these could have been, critically rated high or low or medium, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's more like I just don't hear people talk about them. I just don't think they get any credit in the general, discussion of gaming, basically.
Yeah, and that's very timely because, like, what I want to talk about, I feel like the games that I've picked, so like I feel like they're all underappreciated, and they're just not in the conversations that I think they should be, and I think it's unfair at times, and I think it's sometimes for me about convenient narrative for people where they kind of want to skip over it because it doesn't help a neat story that they want to tell about something, without sort of having the nuance that is actually there. So, and for me, it's not really actually top 3, like in order, kind of like it's a bit rough. Like I kind of, even when I'm thinking about it now, like not even sure if it would be in this order that I'm going to present it. But do you want me to open the batting? Sweeney?
Yes, I should learn to unmute before I reply.
Okay,
yes, kick us off.
All right. So you can't see my screen, but you will be able to see this on YouTube. But I'm going to talk to it anyway. Not number one, I'm just going to say one of my top 3 most underappreciated games is Wolfenstein 3D.
Wow, okay. I'm
Right.
interested to see where you go with this.
Well, I'll defend this. So, this is obviously dating me. But, I was playing games, and I was a little kid, like, by the way, but I was playing games at the time, and I remember when Wolfenstein 3D came out, and it was available, like, back in those days, effectively it was almost like you'd have demos, and then you'd turn demos into full games.
Shareware. Love it.
And so we got this game as shareware, and then I was able to get a copy of it from a store. I think I still have a boxed version of Wolfenstein 3D, like a PC big box version.
I played this game for the very first time at your house on PC. Just putting that out.
And then, like, this is how nuts I got about this game. I actually wrote in to id Software in Texas to get the disc version of Spear of Destiny, which was the expansion pack version. And I think I still have those discs.
Now
at my folks'
that
house.
is probably candid for underappreciated as well, if you count that as a separate thing.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about it now, like, because these were, like, I think that they did it themselves, dude. Like, that they actually
printed the discs and stuff.
Yeah, and wrote on it, like, from memory. That's how I recall it. Like, I wonder how much they're worth now. Like, it's quite a cool piece. I should try to find them. So yeah, like, getting back to this game.
Man, like, I don't know if you're going to mention it, but you were so into that stuff that even when it came to Doom and that, you had, like, Final Doom and stuff. You had all those things. You were
like, I love them, man.
Stuff.
Yeah, I loved it. Like, that. Even though I love console gaming and everything like that, like, I just love so much PC gaming. I love the fact that it's, like, so annoying and so hard to deal with and everything like that. There's just something really cool and magical about it. Oh, okay, I'm just looking. Yeah, these do sell for a lot, actually. And yeah, so, like, getting back to Wolfenstein 3D. So I remember, like, when it came out, I was blown away by this game. This was one of the very first, first-person shooter games. And kind of, like, I would argue that this is really the first first-person shooter. Like, there was Catacombs 3D, there was some other games, but they weren't, like, structured like a first-person shooter. Like, and Wolfenstein 3D, to me, why I've put this as one of the most underappreciated games is because when people talk about this era in games and what had happened in games, everyone talks about Doom. And in a lot of ways, rightfully so. But if you actually look at Doom and then look at Wolfenstein 3D, the kind of innovation from, like, Catacombs 3D and everything else that was out there to Wolfenstein 3D, to me, was more revolutionary than Wolfenstein 3D to Doom.
So,
like, in terms of what you could do in Doom, like, it was elevation, there was a few other things. The setting was really different, which was cool.
So is it?
But I love the setting of Wolf 3D.
It's almost like Demon Souls and Dark Souls. Like, Dark Souls is the one where you're like,
dude,
Soul,
correct.
Dark Souls, and that's the Doom of the the From Software lineup, whereas
Yeah,
Demon's
100%, dude. That's
Demon's Soul
such
should get the credit.
yeah, and then project forward, like people almost don't even mention Wolfenstein 3D. Like they almost like don't talk about it like it's a real thing or anything. Like it doesn't count for some reason. And then with all the remakes and like the continuation of that series, which I love and so cool that they've done that, it still to me hasn't elevated. It still hasn't like, got the zeitgeist like Wolf 3D. And having played through it, I beat the game. I used to draw the maps, which was a very unfortunate process because id Software were naughty boys, and when I would draw these maps and I would draw the boxes and what they would look like, I'm like, this looks like something that you shouldn't be drawing. So because they would love to do that in their maps, they did it quite often.
They didn't have a map in game. They added that in Doom. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, it's just like this game did so much, and I just see no love for it. And if you go back and play it now, it's super playable. It's super playable just like the way that Doom is. And yeah, it just doesn't get the love that I think it should get. And I think, some of my titles that I'll talk about like did sell well, but I just think the way they're being remembered is like a bit harsh. So that's me for my first game, Wolfenstein 3D. What is your first game?
So my first game is a very obscure PlayStation 1 title called Crime Killer. And I swear, I reckon, not only do I think you probably don't know about this game,
I've never even heard of it.
vast majority of people would not know what this game is. Every time I tried to think of this game, for some reason I think of the title Cop Killer, which is a very different thing. First of all, it's a song. Second of all, you are playing as a cop in this game, a future cop.
Okay.
The reason why I think this is underappreciated, so I don't think this is a game that should be considered as a pantheon of a classic PlayStation game or anything. But I remember when I played this game, it blew me away because from a technical standpoint, it's running. So basically, to give some context about the game, sorry, you're a future cop that's basically in like a future cop, car, and you're going around racing around third person or first person, like chasing down drug dealers, completing objectives and stuff. And it's just like a mission based game, but it runs at a silky smooth 60 frames per second on the PlayStation 1. And if you remember, a lot of PlayStation 1 racing games really struggled. Think back even to like the racing, was it Die Hard 3 and Die Hard Trilogy? Obviously anything, Gran Turismo, was a step up, but that's Gran Turismo. This game just felt so smooth. When you're playing it, you're like, wow, this does not feel like a PlayStation game in any way. Like the trade-off is that the visibility is quite short. But I think it's fine because the maps, and it's like, it's when I say a driving game, you're driving around these little open maps. It's not like you're around a course. And you're kind of, doing objectives, chasing down people. But from a technical standpoint, like no one talks about this game. It was developed by a developer called Pixel Logic. It came out in 1998. It was also on PC. So when I'm talking about underappreciated, I think I'm talking specifically about it being a PlayStation game. It just did not feel like a PlayStation game. I remember just being like, what is this? Like, very few games ran at 60 frames per second that I can remember in that era. It's kind of similar to the feeling I got when I was playing F-Zero X on the 64, but that's appreciated. No one talks about this game. Like,
yeah, I've never even heard this game. I'm just looking at gameplay footage of it now. It's like, yeah, it does look crazy actually, because it looks like PlayStation graphics, but silky smooth, if that makes sense in terms of the frame rate.
And it actually controls really nicely, which is like so it creates this really smooth experience. And the reason, like, I'm not going to spend too long on this. The reason why I think it's underappreciated because to me, it was a bit of a technical marvel to have this game. But the game itself is I'd say it's pretty standard. I thought it was fun, but I don't think, as I said, it's going to be considered a classic game or anything. It's got multiplayer. Apparently, it's not that great from what I've heard. I never got to try it. But I'd be interested to see if multiplayer runs 60 frames split screen or if they drop that down or not. But yeah, I think it deserves to have more appreciation. And that's what this whole feature is. Again, is so obscure, no one talks about it. It was published by Interplay, so maybe that's why.
Yeah, like I mean, the visibility is like insanely bad, but
it doesn't
like it might be the worst that I've ever seen in a driving game.
doesn't
To be
actually
honest.
matter that much with the way the maps are structured, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
everything's pretty close. It's not like you're going super top speed on a highway or anything. You're driving around these city streets. But
It does look like a mod or something. Like that's the thing to me. It looks like someone's modded the game and made it run faster, but kept the shitty graphics. If that makes sense. But
it's possible.
that's how the game
I
looked.
would say it's possible that gameplay. I'm not sure if that's that I linked for our video use is PC or PlayStation, but I think it's
Yeah.
probably PlayStation. But I think it's just something that deserves to have more appreciation. So yeah, that was my first game.
Nice, nice, nice. All right, well, let's get into my next game. So this is one of my top 3 most underappreciated games, and it's going to be interesting to see what you think of this one. So one of my games is Terranigma.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
Terranigma, this is one of the ones that we definitely wanted to talk about at some stage, and I'd like to come back to it eventually. But I guess for context, for me, still the Super Nintendo is my favorite console of all time. I have a analog Super NT. There's just like something that's, I think whenever you look at people and go, what were you playing when you were like 12 to 15? Whatever that was, that's typically what your favorite console of all time, if you ask people. And that was kind of around the hitting zone for me. And this game, I never owned a copy of this game, and I would love to own a copy of this game, but they're just insanely expensive now. But you actually own this game, and you lent it to me.
And I took a chance on this game. I knew not because you just didn't hear anything about this at the time. I remember seeing it in Target, and I'm like, oh, what is this game? It's by Enix. I know Enix made some
Illusion of Gaia, Time.
Yeah, like at the time, like Dragon Quest wasn't really on our radar, so it was more like, oh yeah, Illusion of Time, Illusion of Gaia. Like I remember playing that on an emulator. I didn't own it. I don't even know if Illusion of Gaia came out in Australia. It probably did, but yeah,
I think it was Illusion of Time over here from memory.
Yeah.
But so like, and I would always follow and pretty religiously read through all the magazines around Nintendo and stuff like that. But it's funny because now in retrospect, you find out that like that's all just basically marketing material from Nintendo themselves. And yeah, so it did come out, Illusion of Time in Australia, and it's known as Illusion of Gaia in the States. But this game, like as with you, I knew zero about it, and you had it and you lent it to me, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of like, what the hell is this game? It looks really fascinating. And man, I fell in love with this game so hard. How would you describe it? It's kind of like an action RPG.
Yeah.
Would that be accurate?
Yeah, it's an action RPG. Think Secret of Mana and stuff, but you at no point do you stop and bring open like a menu of spells or anything. So it's all the action part of that.
And it's kind of funny because these games kind of fell out of favor. And then if you actually think about it, a lot of games now that were traditionally RPGs are almost like the forebearers or the descendants, of these games. Like Final Fantasy VII Remake is like an action RPG now in a way,
Yep.
right? It's more on the RPG side, but it's kind of almost closer to this game than it has to do with Final Fantasy VI in a weird way.
Yeah, I agree. It's these games, like, Secret of Evermore is a huge one for me as well.
Oh, it's such a good one, yeah.
Then, you kind of saw... I mean, there were action RPGs on the PlayStation, definitely not on the 64, really, but it was the turn-based ones that were, mainly getting the attention, so, until, modern times.
Yeah, and then like that was around the time that Square bought out Enix and then became Square Enix and all that kind of stuff, like a few years after this. And this game, it's just like the vibe of the game, the story, there's a huge twist in this game, and to me, the story lands so well. The tone is very distinct and kind of like suits me because it's like a little bit, not dark, but kind of just like off kilter and a bit, edgy or something. And there's something about that I really like. I feel like this whole game was executed so perfectly. Like the combat, maybe like the leveling system and the way that whole works. Because even though I can recall you grind a bit and you become so powerful, you just destroy everyone in this game. So that's probably one thing that they would have to fix if they ever remade this game. But, going back to the, underappreciated and quite frankly underrated, this game to me, like, I know that it has a bit of buzz, and the context really is that this game never came out in the States. So this game came out in Europe, Australia, and Japan, and has a little bit of a cult following there, but never came out in the States. And it's only through the whole retro movement that people discovered this game. And I always interpreted it that, now people would regard this as like one of the classics. But having looked at it recently, like I actually looked at a top 100 SNES game list, and they were including games that didn't get released in the States. This wasn't even on the list of 100 games for like the SNES in terms of the top 100.
That's insane. That is insane. This is a top 10 SNES game.
It is insane to me. And without getting too controversial, I honestly just put this game on the same level as Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy VI, the Chrono Trigger, like in that kind of category. Like, and I think I'm kind of running out of games to think of like that would be at that level for me. And the fact that not only is it not, like I'd understand if people said, hey, I think it's a level below that. Okay. But it's not even in the conversation, right? It's like not even on the top 100 lists of people that I see. It's criminal, to be honest. And people are sitting on this game. This is one of the games, though, compared to some of those games I just mentioned, like people would just go back to, and it kind of feels a little bit modern in terms of the story and everything like that. Just given the tone is slightly, ever so slightly more adult. And yeah, like this is a game that people should play, and I love this game so much. And yeah, it's definitely a massively underrated game. Like for me, maybe even my number one underrated game.
And this 100% is one of mine as well. But the reason I didn't touch this is, first of all, I expected you may talk about it, and second of all, is that while this game is underappreciated, when it gets talked about, it gets credit when it's talked about. So
that's true.
Yeah, but one thing I love about this game as well is even the Japanese name, which is I think Tenchi Sozo, means the creation of heaven and earth, which is such like, man, that play this game and you'll see why that's cool. But also just to clarify, so while this is an Enix game, it's actually developed by Quintet. So for anyone that knows Quintet, so they worked on Soul Blazer, so SNES action RPG, Illusion of Gaia, and Time, which we just mentioned. And so this is essentially the third game in that trilogy by Quintet. So really, really cool. If you played Illusion of Gaia, which definitely is much more known, then you would love Terra Enigma. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And having played, and they do consider it a trilogy, which is kind of interesting because there's not really strong threads throughout the three games, but for me, this is clearly the best game in the trilogy. And it's also, just for the context, it's the third game they made, which, often if you're on one platform, you learn a lot and things like that. So it's a very strange one to me that this game gets slept on and still hasn't got the regard that it really should have. And it, to me, almost 100% is driven for the fact that they didn't release it in the States as to why it didn't get that following. And it was very late in the cycle, I should say, as well. Like, literally, they had the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64 come out when this game came out. So, that's pretty rough. So that's my second game. What's your second game?
So my second game is a huge favorite of mine. Tomb Raider Anniversary.
Oh, this is interesting. Okay. Well, this is. I'm gonna be seriously interested how you can argue that this is an underappreciated.
Oh, this is definitely underappreciated. Trust me. So Tomb Raider Anniversary, for anybody that's not aware of the game, it was released on a bunch of systems. So originally released on PlayStation 2 and PC. Came to PlayStation 3 afterwards and Xbox 360, got ported to PSP, got ported to the Wii, and eventually I think also wound up on Mac. Came out originally in 1st of June 2007, so developed by Crystal Dynamics, who's still working on, the game, well, not the most recent Tomb Raider games, but, worked on the Tomb Raider reboot. and published by Eidos. And Tomb Raider Anniversary is a remake of the very first Tomb Raider game. But technically the 8th game in the series, and I love this game so much. I bought this game. So for anyone who doesn't know, Tomb Raider series has been rebooted twice. So you had the first, I think it's 4 games, and Angel of Darkness. Angel of Darkness killed the Tomb Raider series. It was so bad. They waited years, and then they released Tomb Raider Legend, which was the reboot. And the Legend trilogy, which is Legend, which came out 2006, Anniversary 2007, which I'm talking about now, and Underworld 2008, that trilogy is 3 of my favorite games. I absolutely love that trilogy. I love it way more than the recent reboots, but obviously the recent reboots are popular. They're fantastic games. That Legend trilogy is just it for me. They basically took the mold of not only the classic Tomb Raider games, but I think Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, Warrior Within, that kind of really smooth controls, climbing mechanics, environmental puzzles, and then they added that all back into the Tomb Raider series and made that trilogy. And the reason why Anniversary, I think, is super underappreciated is because no one ever talks about that particular game. Like, very rarely. A lot of people don't even know it exists. It came out so late at the end of the PlayStation's life cycle that by that point, people had been, they were looking at the PS3 onwards. I actually purchased it full price for the PlayStation 2. That's how much I loved Legend. I'm like, Anniversary I was so pumped for it, and it is so good. It is, to me, the quintessential environmental kind of puzzling game, like Tomb Raider. It's the quintessential Tomb Raider game. I definitely love the first, specifically the first 2 Tomb Raiders, but I mean, they're janky, the controls are tough, especially if you go to it for the first time these days. And these games an Anniversary specifically took these new smooth controls and modern controls and then just added it to the first Tomb Raider and just created one of my absolute favorite games. And what's really weird is, so not only did they release this obviously as a standalone title, but they actually released it as DLC for Legend on the 360 at least as well. So really weird release model. So of course I bought it there as well. Of course.
But wait, didn't Legend come out first?
It did, but they ended up porting it to the 360 as well. And then they made it.
So they ported Legend first to the 360 because that was previously on the GameCube and the Xbox and all that kind of stuff.
I don't think Legend was on GameCube. I think it was just on PlayStation and Xbox, or at least PlayStation 2. But yeah, it's weird. They basically said, okay, Anniversary, you can either buy it standalone as its own thing, or you can buy it as add-on DLC for Legend. But it was really expensive. We're talking like $30-something per, and it was split in 2 parts. So it was basically the cost of a full retail game bought as 2 separate packs of DLC. But because they had different achievement lists, and I love, when we talk about series I love to complete.
Oh my God. This is where you're nuts.
But I really made it until the most recent reboots added multiplayer and stuff, and my drive for completing them all kind of dropped. I said, I really need to do this, because you had time trials where you had to speed run the levels, and so you learnt the levels. And that's why this game is so good. So for anyone that doesn't know much about it, this has some of the most brilliant level design, definitely of any Tomb Raider game. So it took the cool level concepts from the first Tomb Raider, and it made it heaps better with great controls. And yeah, it also has my favorite level in any video game ever. It was one of my favorite levels in the original, which is St. Francis Folly. So it's set in Greece, and basically, after this first big area where you're climbing these big pillars, you enter this huge vertical room. And a lot of people will probably know where I'm getting at if they've played the original Tomb Raider. And that huge vertical room splits off into 4 different areas that are based on Greek mythological figures like Hephaestus and Poseidon and Atlas and Damocles and things like that. But each area has traps and puzzles that are in the theme of those people. So Damocles has swords hanging from the ceiling that will fall down on you. Atlas has this huge globe that you need to run away from. It's just such a cool level, and it's my favorite level ever. And yeah, I love that trilogy so much. And Anniversary, the reason why it gets underappreciated is because, well, a lot of people, honestly, the naming is like I think a lot of people get confused between Legend and Anniversary, and then Underworld came out and closed off the trilogy, which I did like, but Anniversary just is always forgotten about. Like I just never hear anyone talking about it, and the reason why it's underappreciated for me is because I think that game is amazing, and just no one talks about it. Or at least they don't talk about it to the same level that I love it. So I think it's really underappreciated. And it also
it's not a bad one because I hadn't heard of this game. I know that like Tomb Raider got rebooted a couple of times, but I think this one's just been squeezed in and then kind of didn't find its own voice. And just looking through, because it got pretty decent reviews, but it's actually the lowest selling game in the entire franchise history.
And it's such a shame because I've played all of them with the exception of I haven't played the most recent one, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and it's by far my favorite out of any of the games, and it is so good, and it's like it is the most Tomb Raider game ever because other than probably the first one, because it's just all set in tombs and environmental puzzle. There's no like modern things like they're still shooting, but you're shooting against the dinosaurs in the Lost Valley area, or you're climbing in the pyramids in Egypt, and they have the Natla Mine section, which was I think additional content they added in later for the original Tomb Raider, and that's part of this as well. Just really cool. It's got the best voice actress for Lara that did the Legend trilogy and also the Guardian of Light games, those isometric games. So just everything about this game I think is amazing. I'd love if they did a remaster trilogy of these three games, but with the way that the modern reboot sells, there's probably no reason for them to do it. It'd just be something that I'd really like. So
yeah, and then especially given that like this was the worst selling out of 12 Tomb Raider games, and then Underworld I don't think is critically regarded, right?
I think it got pretty average to maybe okay reviews. I quite like Underworld, but I definitely prefer Legend and of course Anniversary.
Yeah. All right. Not sure if you won me over with that one, but I do think the dynamic of like it being the worst selling is quite interesting, and given that it's your favorite game.
But the fact you didn't know it exists, not that you probably know that much about Tomb Raider, it's like no. When you mention this game, most people just don't know it exists, which is a crime because it's so good.
And I think it's also like with Tomb Raider because it's kind of gone a bit all over the place. Like, and there's so many games, right? Like in 25 years that Tomb Raider's been around, is that about right? 25, yeah I think. They've got 12 games, so it's a game every 2 years. That's huge. Like that's a lot.
And there's huge breaks in between. Like the original set of games, and then the Legend trilogy and the recent reboots. But just anyone that loves Prince of Persia: Sands of Time or anything like that, like Tomb Raider Anniversary is fantastic.
Yeah, nice. All right, well, I'll get into my last one. And again, they're not in order, but I think this is the most controversial one. So, well, the last one that I've got in my top 3 of most underappreciated games is Diddy Kong Racing. Now,
God,
this is pretty controversial, this one, because Diddy Kong Racing, I feel like I'm mounting the argument of why I shouldn't include it. Like, from a sales perspective, Diddy Kong Racing is actually, I think, in the top 10 of Nintendo 64 games. And it was received well, like, when it came out. But the challenge for me is that no one really goes back to this game and talks about it. Like, even when I look online to read about this game, there's very little on it compared to, like, other games of that era and, similar games like Crash Team Racing / Mario Kart. And I think, like, ultimately for me, I think, as a huge Mario Kart fan, I still feel like there's not enough lessons to have been learned from this game and applied to Mario Kart and then just the kart racing genre in general. And now I know that like Crash Team has, a story mode and that's core to it. But like for me, when I played Diddy Kong Racing, like, man, I got into this game so hard. And, maybe I don't know. It's really hard if I was to say, do I think that this is better than any Mario Kart game? But like as an overall package, I'd find myself very hard to say that this isn't better than any Mario Kart game overall, because it just gives you so much, and it's so fun. And then like just parking the whole story thing, the game had, hover carts, and then like planes as well as part of the dynamics, and, boss levels, even if they're simplistic. And then also the multiplayer game was like very diverse compared to pretty stock standard stuff that you had in Mario Kart. And I'm kind of shocked that, like, I hear it every now and then, but I don't know. I just feel like, I do actually feel like there's space for multiple kart games on the Switch. I mean, Crash Team Racing has sold pretty well on the Switch even. And like, I would love if they rebooted this franchise and, created a new, like, even if it was Donkey Kong Racing. And I know that this has been like rumored many times and even worked on, but I still feel like there's a gap there. And whether this could fill it, like a second entry in this series. It's not a series, it's only one game, or if they can take finally the lessons from this game and try to do something a bit different with Mario Kart, which, if I apply a business lens, I don't think they will, because look at it, Mario Kart, they re-released it on the Switch, and it's the number one selling game on the Switch, selling like 28 million copies. So I unfortunately feel like, my desire will be unheeded, but yeah, like I take this as one of my most underappreciated games.
Yeah, the thing with this though, I love Diddy Kong Racing, of course. You were so, like, that Wizpig battle at the end was so difficult. So I don't know if I ever got the gold TT time or whatever it was that you had to get on that one. But the thing with this is I do, like, whenever people talk about it, they talk about it super fun. But if your argument is that not enough lessons were learnt, so it's underappreciated in terms of its impact on future games in the genre, then yeah, I agree with that, definitely.
I mean, this game came out, and like, to me, like, and I love that genre, but like, Mario Kart never evolved. Like, this game to me was like decades ahead of what Mario Kart's done. And, Crash Team Racing, and it's a game that I need to play more, but, yes, there were, like, it was almost like a carbon copy, to be honest. They copied a lot from it from 2 years later, but I just feel like this game was so awesome, and I don't understand why people haven't tried to do more with this.
You kind of saw, it felt like Nintendo were going that direction a little bit more with Mario Kart DS, where they started adding the missions, and there was more to it, and then they went away from that again. So it's like Mario Kart DS felt like it had a lot more content if you're just a person playing by yourself, right? Not just having to rely on, because naturally multiplayer games are more inherently, games that are really focused on it are more inherently replayable. Whereas from a single player standpoint, Mario Kart's always been fairly, like, there's not a lot there once you've unlocked everything. Whereas, Mario Kart DS felt like they were, had more there. And whereas Diddy Kong Racing felt like a single player game that you could also play multiplayer. I agree that I'd love them to do it with Mario Kart, but yeah, I'd also love another Diddy Kong game, Diddy Kong Racing game.
Yeah, or like, I would love if they did a mashup, or like a Smash style version of Mario Kart, and added, other races from different genres, and then other sort of vehicles. Like, I think that was one thing that, like, the cancelled Donkey Kong Racing that was meant to come out to the GameCube. Like, they were going to use, the animal buddies from Donkey Kong Country as like kind of modes of transport, so that they were going to handle differently and everything like that. I don't know. Like, I'm a huge fan of the kart racer genre. I think I played every single Mario Kart apart from Double Dash, and when I'm in play, like, get through pretty much 100% the whole thing. And probably Mario Kart DS is my favorite overall. But I don't know. I'd really kind of like, I've never been asked the question, but I'd probably still say that Diddy Kong Racing I prefer over all of them, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I should go back and play it again, but just like, it's such a shame to me that game didn't grow legs, and they didn't kind of go on and make further games, and didn't try to do more like that game tried to do.
I'd love them to start, and you started to see it with the DLC a bit when they added Link and that for Mario Kart 8. But
Yeah, an inkling. Yeah.
I'd love them to kind of follow the path that Sega Racing All Stars did, where they started to really make it much more of a, as I said, a Smash situation, where the actual carts themselves are like really representative of games where they're from. And by all accounts, I think I've only probably played the demos of them, but the Sega Racing All Stars, like those games are really good as well. So I don't know what the single player content's like in them, if they're kind of closer to Mario Kart than Diddy Kong, I imagine so. But I think there's space for growth in that genre. I really do.
Yeah, this is the last thing I'll say, that to me, I look at it and go, it's a very basic game ultimately, but they're trying to do something different, and people do love kart racing games. Like, you look at the sales of kart racing games, they're crazy for the amount of effort you put in. And if I was a developer, I'd probably go, hey, how do we make a really different kart racing game where it has a lot of story and consequences and stuff you can do? Because the mechanics of playing kart racing games, it's just inherently fun because it's so sloppy and a bit arcadey. And I just think there's so much to do there, and it hasn't been explored. And for me, eventually when they explore this and plumb this kind of genre, I feel like people may then eventually turn back to Diddy Kong Racing and kind of go, wow, they were trying to do that kind of stuff, back in 97 or whatever it was, versus, now we're in 2020 and it feels like it hasn't even evolved much since then. So yeah, that's my top three. And then let's get into your last and your other top three underappreciated games.
Yeah, so this is probably my favorite game of these underappreciated. And if there's one thing you notice, I haven't talked about any RPGs in my top three. So of course I have to have an RPG. So my third most underappreciated game is Resonance of Fate. So Resonance of Fate is otherwise known as End of Eternity in Japan, so if anyone knows it by that term. But Resonance of Fate was what it's known in the West. So Resonance of Fate came out on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 originally, and then got ported to as a HD remaster to PlayStation 4 and PC. Not Xbox One, which is a shame, but oh well. So it came out in 2010. Developed by Tri-Ace, who are known for Star Ocean, Valkyrie Profile. They also worked on Final Fantasy 13-2, Infinite Undiscovery, which is not so great, but it was published by Sega for the original release, and then for the HD remaster by Arc System Works. So Resonance of Fate is just so cool. This game, I just wanted. This is the game that I just want to share with everyone. When we talk about underappreciated, this is the one that I just want to be everyone play this. But the problem with this game is that it's also has one of the biggest learning curves of any game I've ever played. So a lot of what this game the reason why this turned people away is because the combat system, which is my favorite combat system probably in any RPG except for maybe Final Fantasy X, is also super complicated and hard to learn at first. And it makes the game really hard until it clicks with you. But before I get to there, I just want to kind of just set the scene. So it's set in this world called Basel, which is this giant structure, giant tower. And it's essentially the rest of the world. Apparently it's like a future Earth or something has been poisoned by the atmosphere. So this huge tower is like a purification system, and the way it works is to make people immune to it. They link their lives to these stones quartzes, but the side effect is everyone has a set social status and a set lifespan. So it's just from a plot standpoint setting, it's really cool. It's steampunky everywhere. It's basically there's really no grass or trees anywhere. It's pretty much brick and stone, but it's got this really cool vibe to it. And you play as a mercenary group that does tasks for the citizens of this Basel, or this giant tower. And yeah, it's just from a plot standpoint, I will say it's not the strongest plot, but it's all about the the vibe and the gameplay. The gameplay is just crazy. So that battle system I was talking about, not only is it one of my favorite, but it's one of the most unique battle systems I've ever played. I don't think I've played another game like it since. There may have been other games like it that I haven't played, but it's all based on guns and explosives. There's no melee. So you think about a JRPG, it's all guns and explosives, which already is pretty unique. And the way it works is you got SMGs that do scratch damage, so it'll like build up this type of damage, and then handguns will then do direct damage. So you build up the scratch damage, and then you break that scratch damage and cause the real damage with the other type. So what you got to do is you've got to mix up your 3 characters with different weapon types, and then explosives break off armor and also do direct damage. So it's a really, really cool battle system that's all focused on, it's called Tri-Attack. So it's based on your character's positioning and doing crazy acrobatics in combination with charging up attacks to take out the enemies. And once it clicks with you, it creates the most stylish, awesome battles ever. That's why it's so cool. Like, it's actually probably, when someone's playing it that really knows what they're doing, and it's probably really fun to watch because of how dynamic and crazy the battles get, where you're flipping over bosses behind cover. It's pretty intricate, and it like, even to the point, your position matters so much that you've got to make your character, like, let's say you've got your 3 characters, the character you're controlling in that turn, you've got to make them run between the other 2 characters to like get a point. And you've got to keep positioning your characters to the point where then you get enough to like trigger Tri-Attack moves where they all run and do acrobatics at the same time. It's just so cool. But the problem is that it's really complicated. So until you learn, and there is like an arena where it tries to teach it to you, honestly, the real thing I can say against the game is that, it needed better tutorials. But once you learn it, it's so cool. This game is just awesome. And it's one of my other favorite things about it is, so we talk about guns, like the weapons in the game. So weapon customization is so cool in this. So the way it works is you get your gun, you put it on like a blueprint, and then you physically attach all the attachments, like the scopes, the barrels, and everything physically to the guns on the blueprint. But it's hilarious because you can create these crazy monstrosities. If you want to laugh, just look up Resonance of Fate, like weapon blueprint or something, and you'll see some crazy, stupid looking guns that are awesome. But it's so much fun because as soon as you unlock or you craft a new attachment, you just want to go back and start working and customizing your guns. It's really, really cool. And the last thing I'll say about the game is the map and the overworld is really unique. So it's like a hexagon grid system. And you unlock through battles and through quests, you unlock hex pieces. They're almost like Tetris pieces in a way, where it's got like a line of hexes, like 4 hexes in a row, or you've got like a hex that goes around a corner, or like a TP style thing. And then you lay that out to unlock the map and activate nodes and things. And it's really, really cool. I just haven't played anything like it since. And it's got a pretty good in-game stuff and New Game Plus, so there's a lot to keep your attention. I really, really cannot talk enough about Resonance of Fate, and the reason why I think it's underappreciated, because people that love this game love it. It's that it just didn't move the needle when it came out. So I remember when it came out, people were like, oh, this cool new steampunk gun JRPG, and then it just disappeared. So when we talk about games that are kind of lost in the mire, that just don't come up, when you talk about, top, RPGs or, cool RPGs, just, it doesn't come up that often. I would say out of all my 3, this is the one that gets the most credit, but I don't think it gets enough credit. So that's why I think it's underappreciated.
I'm looking at the gameplay footage. It does look like really insane.
It's crazy.
Like,
it
looks
crazy.
like even a crazier version of Bayonetta or something.
Yeah,
which is saying something.
It's really cool, and the way it works as well is, so when you add more barrels to your gun, for instance, it allows you to charge up more of the circles as you're running. So it's not like you running and you mashing the button. You're actually waiting for the charge ups and then let go at the right times. Like, it's actually really challenging, but it's really what's the right term? Like, you get a lot out of it. You know, you feel like you've actually won the
Like
battles.
rewarding or something.
Yeah, rewarding. It's really rewarding.
Yeah,
Great
nice. So just to summarize, my top 3 in no order was Wolfenstein 3D, Terranigma, and Diddy Kong Racing, and your top 3 was Crime Killer, Tomb Raider Anniversary, and Resonance of Fate. It was really interesting just to have a deep dive on underappreciated games, and it's always, I don't know about you, but just like looking through and thinking through it as well. It's interesting how some games have changed in opinion in terms of they kind of almost have become, okay, that is recognized and loved, versus I think all of these games probably don't get the amount of love that they deserve. All right, well, I think that does us for this week's episode. It's quite a lengthy episode. If you do want to help us out, make sure you reach out to us at on Twitter, Big Week Pod, or in the comments at YouTube. If you do want to see the show grow, make sure you give us a 5-star review on your podcast service of choice. It is going to be a really exciting couple of weeks, really, with all the next gen coming out. But with that, I'll say goodbye.
See ya.